Hi, everybody. Ezra Levant here for Rebel News. I have spent the last day looking at the proposed Online Harms Act. This is the most authoritarian internet censorship law in the free world. It has elements that you would expect to find in North Korea or China or Iran. That's not just my own view. When these ideas were first floated several years ago, when Stephen Guilbeault was the heritage minister, Twitter, and this is pre-Elon Musk Twitter, wrote a private briefing note to the government saying, we have not seen any legislation like this anywhere in the free world other than North Korea. Twitter actually said that, and that was pre-Elon Musk. That was pro-censorship Twitter, who couldn't believe it. This Online Harms Act is called Bill C-63. And it's so important to the liberals that they've actually changed the title, changed the name of the Justice Minister. He's now the Minister of Justice and Online Harms. There are thousands of laws in Canada. The criminal code itself has hundreds of different crimes in it. Rape, murder, extortion, theft. Of every law in this country, the most important law to the Liberal government, the most important law to Justin Trudeau, is this Online Harms Censorship Bill. They don't call him the Minister of Justice and the Constitution, the Minister of Justice and Freedom. They call him the Minister of Justice and Online Harms. That is his new official title as a cabinet minister that tells you the importance the government places on this. And I've been telling you this for years. I've been warning about the four-step plan Trudeau has to control the internet. The first was C-11, which was in some ways the most important building block. It was the law that basically gave the CRTC, which is Canada's TV and radio regulator, domain over the internet, something that had never happened before. The CRTC has destroyed any entrepreneurial TV, radio, movie productions in Canada. That's why they all are down in Hollywood. I mean, they come up to Toronto to film, but it's all run out of the States. CanCon and all the other rules. And so the internet in Canada actually flourished as an alternative. And in C-11, Trudeau commandeered the internet and the right to regulate it. And he did one more thing, and I mentioned this many times, is that he gave himself the power to alter the algorithms. Can you call up C-11? We'll just do this briefly, because we're here to talk about C-63. But C-63 is the result of several steps. C-11 gave Trudeau the power to command Facebook, YouTube, and other internet broadcasters to alter their algorithm for the discoverability of content. Just search the word discoverability. You'll find it there in the law. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I just want to show you how over the last, that's exactly it. Is that on the screen there? Scroll up just a little bit. And we're sharing that with our viewers. There we go. So scroll up a little bit so we just read the top of the paragraph. You scroll up. So anyhow, we'll just read the one part there. Go down to what you've highlighted. To ensure the discoverability of Canadian programming, services, and original Canadian programs, including original French language programs, in an equitable proportion. And click next for discoverability. Search the next appearance of it on the page. And the next one, please. There it is. This is the section. The word discoverability appears several times. This is one of the powers that Trudeau gave the CRTC, When you Google something, when you search for something on Facebook, when you search for something on Netflix, when you search for something on YouTube or Twitter video, the CRTC has the power to make orders affecting, quote, the presentation of programs and programming services for selection by the public, including the showcasing and the discoverability of Canadian programs and programming services, such as original French language programs. So they give an example, but that's just one of any reasons they can alter the discoverability. So let me just close and move on from C11. C11 gave Trudeau power over the internet, and very important, it gave him the power to order the huge internet companies to alter the discoverability. That is, when you type in Rebel News or you type in Trudeau or you type in anything else, it would alter what's boosted and what's throttled for any reason at all, including to promote French and Indigenous things. But they also talk a lot about trusted sources of news, which are the ones that Trudeau supports. That was C11. The next bill was C18, and I'll be briefer in my description of it. C18 basically commandeered Facebook and Google and said, you guys have to pay our trusted journalists every time you link to them, which makes no sense because, of course, media companies love when you get a link from Facebook or Google. That's how you get traffic. In fact, media companies pay to advertise in Google and Facebook to get traffic. So when the government came to Google and Facebook and said, pay us $100 million, and we're going to distribute it to the people we call trusted news sources, only the government gets to determine that. Facebook said, yeah, no thanks, we're just not going to be shaken down for $100 million. We're no longer going to publish Canadian news. And they literally turned off Canadian news. That's damaged every independent news channel in Canada because we no longer have organic traffic like that. Google agreed to pay $100 million. It had sort of agreed to pay that anyways. But that's C18, taking money from these tech companies and paying it out to the trusted journalism sources on top of Trudeau's media bailout. So the average journalist in Canada who's covered by these bailouts gets about a third of their money, a third of their salary covered by the government. This would bring in Facebook and Google to cover another third of their salaries. Facebook said, I'm out, but Google is in. So that was the second step. We're now in the third step, Bill C-63. And this is the one that is the most devastating of all. It is a hodgepodge of different things altogether, and that's deliberate. Because there are certain things in this bill that are not just inoffensive, they're actually not bad ideas. Cracking down on child pornography is something that Facebook refuses to do. I think it's probably a good thing to crack down on Facebook. By the way, child pornography is already against the law in Canada. It's against the criminal code. Having particular laws or policies dealing with Facebook, I don't think anyone would object to that. But that is what the Liberals are talking about noisily, but they've got a stowaway in there. While they make a lot of noise about fighting against child pornography, and I'm glad they are, tucked into this bill are political crimes too. So when they say online harms and digital safety, this is about the children. Oh, well, who would be against that? But that's not the purpose of this bill. Those things are already covered by the criminal code, and that is not the heart of this legislation. The heart of this legislation is rather hidden. It's political censorship, which actually includes a life sentence. In Canada, 25 years is considered a life sentence. There are criminal penalties for political views in this law that have nothing to do with child pornography. Trudeau will always talk about child pornography to try to shut anyone up from criticizing this bill. But that is not the purpose of this law. This law, frankly, is probably not even necessary. The criminal code itself gives police the power to go after child pornography in any medium. Child pornography on the internet has been a factor for, well, since the internet was born. I'd say for 30 years, other legal tools, especially the criminal code, have been used. That is a distraction to give cover for the political purposes here. Now, I want to start with a summary document that's 17 pages. This is a briefing backgrounder that was given to journalists yesterday in advance of the law being rolled out. So you could go into a lockup, agree not to leak this, and you would have an hour or so to review this. So when the government published the law, certain journalists were ready to go. We had a couple of journalists in the lockout. The lockup is over, so this is a public document. So let's go through that. It's just 17 pages. This, of course, is the government's spin on what they want to emphasize, but we'll go through this quickly. We'll take about 5 minutes. And then we're going to go through the bill itself. And I want to go through the bill. It's a 100-page bill. I'm not going to go through every single page. And by the way, half of that is in French, so it's not quite as long as it sounds. And some of that's just repetitious. So we're going to go through probably about 30 pages of the meat and potatoes of this law, because I don't know if you're going to get that kind of investigation in the mainstream media. So let's start with this PowerPoint that was given to journalists yesterday. Bill C-63, Online Harms, February 2024. Why is this bill needed is the first slide. Online platforms are Canada's digital public square, but my immediate response is, and they are already governed by the law. You don't need a special new law to govern telephones and fax machines and emails and the internet. You can adapt your policies, but a law against a death threat applies in person, it applies on the phone, it applies to a tweet. So obviously online platforms are the public square. They have been for years, and they have been governed by existing laws. Let's keep going. Canadians are exposed to harmful content at increasing rates. And you can see their asterisk there points to a statistic about child abuse. And I don't doubt that's true. And you'll see immediately they're trying to pass this bill off as a child abuse bill. Canadians want action against child abuse, I'm sure. Users and victims need better tools to have a safer online experience. Again, parental controls have been part of every internet site since the beginning. Any parent knows there are controls on YouTube, etc. Lack of accountability and transparency on how platforms protect users from harmful content. But you can see so far, they haven't told you what they mean by harmful other than an oblique reference to child abuse. Objectives: reduce harmful content online, promote safety. They use that word. They use the word public health a lot when they told you had to be locked in your house and you couldn't fly and you couldn't go to a restaurant and you couldn't go to a funeral and you couldn't go to a wedding and you couldn't go to your family for Christmas. They use the word health and safety. They're using the word safety here again. And you see protect children is right there. All of that sounds great, doesn't it? And that's what the Liberals are going to lean on. But look to the very, very bottom of the page, the very small fine print. They say 4 out of 10 Canadians are exposed to online hate speech on a monthly or weekly basis. They don't have a source for that. So you can see they're starting to blur the lines. Oh, I thought you were talking about child abuse. Oh, no, hate speech. What's hate speech? Justin Trudeau hates the unvaccinated. He made it pretty clear. Justin Trudeau hates the trucker convoy. He pretty clearly hates Russia. I don't know if he hates Israel, but he sure is chummy with Hamas. Justin Trudeau is like any other human being. He loves certain things and he hates certain things. Hate is a human emotion. So what does it mean to be exposed to online hate speech? They don't quite define that, and we'll focus on that when we get into the law itself. Let's keep going. I don't want to be too bogged down, but I want to show you see already, if this is all you saw, other than that tiny last line I read to you, you would say, oh, this is a bill against child abuse. Well, obviously we support that, which is sort of weird, given that Justin Trudeau so vociferously has said parents shouldn't be allowed to interfere if their minor children want to take puberty blockers or have surgery to cut off their genitals. So it's sort of weird to have Justin Trudeau to pretend to care about kids when he just spent the last month saying he believes minor children have the rights to life-altering surgery without their parents' consent. Let's keep going. Online harms bill would reduce exposure to harmful content online. Okay, so they're back to that generic word harmful. If they said child abuse or child exploitation videos, I would be all on board. But you can see that they're using that as the way in, that's the doorway to censor the whole internet. Number 2, better address and denounce hate propaganda and provide recourse to victims of hate. Okay, now they're starting to get into the hate thing. Now, I've been living in Canada for quite a while, including since October 7th, when the Hamas terrorist group went on a murder and rape binge, a terrorist attack in southern Israel. That was horrific from a foreign affairs point of view, but that unleashed a torrent of hate and calls for genocide from the river to the sea. That's a call to exterminate every Jew from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. Justin Trudeau, Arif Virani, the Justice and Online Harms Minister, other cabinet ministers, including the Foreign Minister, Melanie Joly, they haven't lifted a finger against hate propaganda and genocidal, hate speech on our streets in real life. In fact, they've sort of done the opposite. They've been so generous and gentle with Hamas. Hamas even put out a thank you video to them, which I've never seen that in history before. If anything, they're helping Hamas. They fast-tracked tens of millions of dollars to the Hamas-linked UN Relief Works Agency. So do you expect me to believe that the Liberal government of Canada, that has been silent or even tacitly approving of this tidal wave of anti-Semitic and sometimes genocidal hate in Canada in real life, on the streets, in people chanting, do you think they really care about actual hatred, or do you think they just want to demonize their opponents as hateful, lump them in with child abusers, and create a new law to attack them? Which do you think? This is the Liberal government that hired an anti-racist named Laith Marouf, and they paid him hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they still haven't got the money back. Do you really think that the Liberal government that invited a Nazi SS officer to Parliament, do you really think those are the people who are going to lift a finger to actual hate propaganda? They don't stop hate in real life. They are doing this as a censorship tool, and we'll show that when we get into the bill. I'm going to speed up a little bit here because I don't want to spend too much time on this. This is basically a propaganda flyer they gave to journalists. Point 3, strengthen reporting of child pornography. I think that's an important thing. That is not the essence of this bill. Let's go to the next page. New Online Harms Act. Objectives: reduce exposure to harmful content and empower and support users. Put in place special protections for children. Make online services accountable for and transparent about how they are reducing exposure to harmful content. Services covered: social media, live streaming services, and user-uploaded adult content. So again, they're at that. What on earth does that have to do with hate propaganda? What they're talking about there, I think, is revenge porn. And I think it's appropriate that that be legislated. And other forms of pornography, especially when in regards to children. But you see, they're lumping that in every time they say we're going to stop you from hating. Oh, and we're going to go after the child pornographers. They're trying to make it so if you say, whoa, those are completely different things, they're trying to hang the child pornography necklace around your head when you're saying you're actually you're using that to go after political speech. Let's keep going. They have 7 categories of harmful content. Let's look at their flyer here again. I'm actually just on page number 4, in the bottom right there. Content that sexually victimizes a child or re-victimizes a survivor. I agree that should be regulated. Content used to bully a child. All right, I'm not sure if bullying is a crime. Bullying is a very vague term that frankly can cover almost anything. So I'm nervous when the federal government is getting into criminalizing bullying. I think bullying is something that's best handled at the lowest possible level. A teacher, a principal, parents, other kids. To criminalize bullying makes me very nervous. Content that induces a child to harm themselves. I think in general, people couldn't be against that. But Justin Trudeau, just the other day, said he was absolutely in favor of minor children being able to surgically alter themselves forever and not to let their parents have a say in it. So does that count as children harming themselves? Content that incites violent extremism or terrorism. That's already covered in the criminal code, by the way. Inciting violence is absolutely a crime. So I think that's thrown in there again to say, oh, you're not against banning terrorism, you're soft on terrorism. Well, actually, those are existing crimes. To incite violence and to incite terrorism are both existing crimes in our criminal code. Again, that's put in there to try and say, well, if you're against this bill, you must be for terrorism, which is quite something, given Justin Trudeau's love affair with terrorists, whether it was Omar Khadr, to whom he gave $10.5 million, or Hamas, to whom he gave tens of millions of dollars. I'll keep going. Content that incites violence. Well, we just covered that. That's already in the criminal code. Content that foments hatred. Now, that sounds good, but what does that mean? What's hatred? Hatred's a human emotion. You love things, you hate things, you have respect for things, you have contempt for things. If you never feel the feeling of hate, you don't have a full personality. The thing in life is not to give in to hate, to use it to do something positive, to transmogrify that into some reform, to peaceful protest. But fomenting hate in itself is just a feeling. It's a feeling. It's not an action. I'm certain that by any definition you give of the word hatred, I can prove to you that Justin Trudeau hates things. He hates conservatives. He hates Pierre Poilievre. He hates Rebel News. He hates the unvaccinated. He hates truckers. He hates people he calls racist. He hates people he calls transphobes. He hates people who disagree with him. He certainly hates Russia. I think he hates Donald Trump. Justin Trudeau hates a lot of things. And, it's not a good look on him. But that's not a crime. It's a feeling. And by the way, you cannot pass a law to change people's feelings. If we could, we would just pass the Love Each Other Act and poof, we'd all love each other and there would be no hate. But that you can no more make someone love you than make someone stop hating you just by waving a wand. That's the hard work of a society trying to find a way to relate to each other. Simply banning, fomenting hatred, what does that mean? I'll tell you exactly what it means. It means whatever Justin Trudeau wants it to mean. There's an old saying, I think it was Beria, the founder of the predecessor to the KGB, Lavrenti Beria, he was Stalin's secret policeman. He said, "Show me the man and I'll find you the crime." By which he meant, we've got the laws in place to basically get anyone. Just tell me who you want, and I'll find the crime that applies to him. In this Online Harms Act, they have some very, very specific things, like child abuse, which the entire world agrees should be banned. Well, not quite the entire world. For some reason, Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook don't seem to ban it. But I think the vast majority of people would immediately accept that, and the vast majority of people, I think, would be pleased to know that's already a crime. It is already a crime. I think the vast majority of people would want to ban inciting violence or inciting terrorism, and the vast majority of people would be delighted to know that's been in our criminal code for a very long time. But if you said to people, it's a crime now to foment hatred, they might say, oh yeah, that sounds good. But then you say, what does foment mean? And what does hatred mean? Is that just a feeling in your heart? Because I know what it means to ban me from inciting violence, but I don't know what it means to ban me from fomenting a feeling, other than it means whatever Trudeau says it means. Let's keep going. The last one on that list there is intimate content communicated without consent, including deep fakes. So what they're saying is they want to, that's basically banning revenge porn and using deep fakes to create fake pornography of someone. I think most people would agree that uploading sexual imagery of someone without their permission should be a crime. I think so. I think that both liberals and conservatives would agree to that. I'm not quite sure how to regulate deep fakes, but I'm not opposed to that. I'd like to learn more about it. That's just in there so they can say anyone who is opposed to this bill is opposed to that. No, I'm fine with banning revenge porn. Actually, I sort of think it's against the law in certain jurisdictions already. They want to ban you from the feeling of hate that they define. Let's keep going. Let's speed up a little bit here. How will it work in practice? Online services will be subject to 3 duties: duty to act responsibly, duty to make certain content inaccessible, and duty to protect children. I think that every social media company would right now say they're generally doing this, but the devil's in the details. Let's keep going. Duty to act responsibility. I think that just as a user of social media, I can tell you that's clearly not the case. I'm on TikTok, which is a very young app in terms of a user base. It's full of violence and sexuality more than any other app I'm aware of. But that seems to get a pass from authorities in Canada and the United States because it's a China-controlled app as opposed to an Elon Musk-controlled app. Listen, I'm all for child safety, for minimum age to use an app. I'm all for that, and I think social media companies actually are, in general, attentive to that. Provide tools to flag content and block users. Every single social media company already does that. In fact, you may know, it's a requirement to get on the Apple App Store. It's probably the same for the Android App Store. If you don't have a block function, you will actually not be able to sell your app through those services. So this is, again, them announcing something that's already the law to get people to say, yeah, that makes sense. Well, yeah, that is the law. That is not the purpose of the Online Harms Act. You have to understand you are the target of the Online Harms Act, not child pornographers, not violent terrorists. Those are already covered by criminal law. You are the target. Let's keep going here. Duty to make certain content unacceptable. Users can flag content, file a complaint. They already have that right with every social media app I'm familiar with, but you can see in that box they've changed something. You can flag the content directly on the online service and or file a complaint to the Digital Safety Commission. What's that? That's one of the 3 new censorship organizations that Trudeau is creating. And you see and or, you don't even have to say, hey, Facebook, I found something bad on your site. You go straight to the government. And that's where the troubles lie. The government has set up 3 new censorship agencies because they have their own idea on what should be censored, different from these tech companies. And I say again, you are what they're coming for. Let's keep going. Oh, no, let me say the thing in the bottom box there that is actually a shocking thing that they included. Both channels would screen for frivolous flags and complaints. Both channels result in removal within 24 hours, subject to oversight and review. Now, this was something in the draft bill that Stephen Guilbeault announced a few years ago when he was the Heritage Minister who took first crack at this law. So within 24 hours of receiving a complaint, a social media company has to take a complaint down within 24 hours. Okay, so let's say someone complains at 11 p.m. on Friday night. I'm not sure who's at the office at 11 p.m. on Friday night. Let's say Facebook has a 24/7 censorship committee. How do you get the other side of the story? How do you have a proper hearing into it? There's certain things I can imagine you would just say immediately, oh, that's pornography or that's terrorism. But that's not what the bill's about, again. I think that actually the tech companies are pretty good at taking down terrorism. They might even be too good at it. They're censoring things that aren't actually terrorism. But you've got 24 hours to make a decision, not just on the black and white stuff like pornography, revenge porn, and terrorism. You've got 24 hours to take down political hate speech. And if you don't, there's massive consequences to the social media company. How do you hear the other side of the story? If someone complains about, Rebel News at 11 p.m. on a Friday night, is it really likely that we will be contacted, have an opportunity to make our case, have an opportunity to have that properly heard by 11 p.m. Saturday night? Or will it much more likely be that the tech companies just, we're being flagged, nuke it, just delete it, because if not, we're going to get a massive penalty from the state. Here, let's keep going. Duty to protect children. Again, they're putting, you notice how they put that right in after, they put this in, they're interspersing the child abuse stuff and the terrorism stuff between their political agenda. The child abuse stuff is already embedded in every social media company. They all have age limits, they all have flagging, they all have parental controls. I'm not saying it can't be improved. For example, you can see right there in the box, they want parental controls, they want content warning labels, they want safe search setting for children. If you've ever used Google, YouTube, Facebook, you know those are already there. Are they necessary in an Online Harms Act? Yes, because that's to camouflage the real purpose of the law. Let's keep going. What online services are covered? Social media, user uploaded content, above a threshold of users to be set out in regulation. Let's keep going, because this is just their propaganda document. I want to get into the law itself. They have 3 new bureaucracies, 3 new government agencies to censor you. And I've been saying this actually for years, ever since I saw what they were doing in C11 and then C18, and they used to have a bill called C36 that they've sort of bundled together with the Online Harms Act. They needed one after the other. This is how the government is taking control of the internet. And Justin Trudeau will hand-pick the members of the Digital Safety Commission, the Digital Safety Ombudsperson, and the Digital Safety Office. What's the difference between the Digital Safety Commission and the Digital Safety Office and the Digital Safety Ombudsperson? There are shades of difference, but basically what you need to know is there are 3 new censorship hunter-killer organizations out there that are coming for you. Justin Trudeau, this is his 3rd censorship bill. C11 was first, C18 was second, and this is sort of blending together online harms, what they used to call C36. Justin Trudeau does not have 3 bills on inflation. He does not have 3 bills on balancing the budget. He doesn't have 3 bills on the carbon tax. There is nothing he cares about as much as censorship. And he's proven that by renaming the Justice Minister, the Minister of Justice and Online Harms. Let's keep going. The Digital Safety Commission, 5 members appointed by the cabinet. Who's he going to pick? Whoever he wants to. Whoever he knows will censor you, me. Who do you think he's going to censor first, you or me? I'm thinking maybe me. Let's keep going. Enforce rules and hold services accountable. See, they're not actually going to come for Rebel News. They'll come for Twitter. They'll go to YouTube. They'll go to Facebook and say, you've got to take down this Rebel News stuff within 24 hours. They're not actually going to send me a note at all. They're not going to email me. They're going to go straight to the big providers and say, take down Rebel News. Take down True North. Take down Countersignal. Take down Western Standard. Take down any news source. Take down National Post. Why wouldn't they do that? Oh, we didn't do that. That's the Digital Safety Commission. They're an independent agency. We handpicked them all. We chose them because they're censors, but no, we got nothing to do with it. That's the independent. That's just like when Trudeau handpicked the Liberal Debates Commission that 2 times banned Rebel News from attending the national leaders' debates. We had to go to court 2 times to overturn that. But Justin Trudeau handpicked the commissioners there, including his buddy Craig Kielburger, which is super weird. Imagine putting Craig Kielburger on the National Election Debates Commission. Trudeau's going to put Laith Marouf. He's going to put maybe Omar Al-Gabra, the pro-Hamas extremist. He's going to pack this with his buddies who know their job is to be hunter-killers for his critics. It's got nothing to do with child pornography or terrorism. That's already covered by other laws, and we can see that Justin Trudeau really doesn't give a damn about incitement to violence when it's Jews. I mean, he's been pretty silent about it the last 5 months. Order removal of content that sexually victimizes a child or re-victimizes a survivor, and intimate content communicated without consent. Okay, no one could be against taking down revenge porn, but that's not what they're talking about in this law. Let's keep going. The ombudsperson is basically just another censor advocate. We'll just speed up here. Criminal code amendments. Oh, this first one is just perhaps the most stunning. I alluded to it. a new standalone hate crime offense that would apply to every offense in the criminal code and in any other act of Parliament, allowing penalties up to life imprisonment to denounce and deter this hateful conduct as a crime in itself, rather than as an aggravating factor to help determine an appropriate sentence. Justin Trudeau doesn't believe in life in jail for anything. One of his first moves was to repeal Stephen Harper's mandatory minimum sentences for various crimes. There is nothing in the criminal code other than first-degree murder, which has life in prison. Of course, that actually means 25 years in Canada. Justin Trudeau has created a generic, standalone hate crime up to life imprisonment. You see it here. It's not an aggravating, just the hate in your heart, your feeling of hate is now a crime in itself. That's what this is. I mean, for years, if you were motivated by hate, it was an aggravating factor in the crime. So let's say you stabbed someone because you were in a drunk bar fight. That's obviously terrible, assault with a weapon. But if you hated them because they were black and you stabbed them because they were black, for years, for decades, that's an aggravating factor. And I think that probably makes sense. Although stabbing someone is stabbing someone, we certainly want to deter hate-motivated crimes. But it's the crime we're worried about. The hate aggravates it. I don't think most people would be against that. That's how the state of things are in Canada for decades now. But understand what they're doing here. Now you don't need the stabbing part. The hate part itself is now the crime, if I'm reading this correctly. A standalone hate crime offense. Let's keep going. Raise the maximum punishments for the 4 hate propaganda offenses from 5 years to life imprisonment. For advocating genocide, I don't believe this, because we have people who are advocating genocide on our streets every day, pro-Hamas protesters. They're not even arrested for minor offenses. In Toronto, there was a street near a Jewish community that would be blocked off by Hamas supporters. The Jews had to go around, and the police literally brought coffee to the Hamas protesters. They didn't arrest them for advocating genocide. Oh, this one's incredible. New peace bond designed to prevent hate propaganda offenses and hate crimes. Let me put that in plain English. You can now face legal action before you do anything. Just if someone thinks you're going to hate in the future. It's like that movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise, where there's the 3 precogs it's a science fiction story, where 3 people have the ability to see the future, and the police are now called the Department of Pre-Crime, and they go and arrest you right before you commit the crime. And you say, I didn't commit the crime. Yeah, we didn't say you did. We said you were about to. And the story in that movie is one of the 3 precogs would have a dissenting view. That would be called the Minority Report. It was a great movie. That's what this is. A peace bond to prevent hate propaganda. You haven't done it yet. No one says you have. You haven't actually hurt anyone. You haven't stabbed anyone. You haven't even expressed your hate feelings yet, but we sure think you're gonna, so we're gonna censor you in advance. We'll get into that. I'm gonna speed up because I've spent a little bit too much time going through this pamphlet, but it is a good summary. Let's speed up. Add a definition of hatred to Section 319 of the Criminal Code. Canadian Human Rights Act amendment. Now, see, like I say, there's a hodgepodge here. The reason they're not that detailed on the child abuse stuff is because that's already handled in law. There are very few additions in this online harms bill that have anything to do with child abuse. But look at this, the Canadian Human Rights Act. This is the bill to replace the repealed section of the Human Rights Act from a decade ago. I don't know if you remember, but about 15 years ago, I was prosecuted as the publisher of the Western Standard print magazine for publishing the Danish cartoons of Muhammad. And I was put through a 3-year ordeal at the hands of the Alberta Human Rights Commission for publishing something likely to expose a person to hatred or contempt. So likely to, it's that future crime again, and not even a real crime. Real crime would be stabbing someone or punching someone. Likely to expose a person to hatred or contempt. It's likely to cause this person to feel bad about that person. It's not even a crime, it's not even a thing. After my case and Mark Stein's case, we lobbied MPs and Parliament voted to strike down that section. Well, here Trudeau's putting it back in. That same hate speech provision that was used to prosecute me for 3 years for publishing some cartoons in a news story. I didn't publish the cartoon saying, I drew this because it expresses how I feel. I published it saying, here's Exhibit A of what all the fuss is about. This is the news. We're showing you the news. We're going to talk about the news. That is now illegal again if this bill passes. Objective, ensure better recourse for victims of hate, not victims of crime, not victims of stabbing or even victims of discrimination in housing or employment, just victims of hate. Specify that posting hate speech online is discrimination. Empower people to file complaints. So they want to generate as many complaints as possible, and you'll see in the bill that they reward complaints up to 20 grand each. Allow the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, here it is right here, to adjudicate disputes and order the poster to remove the hate speech, compensate victims up to 20 grand. So you can imagine there's going to be hundreds, maybe thousands of complaints, because instead of just typing an email, I don't like you, I want to cancel you, now hundreds of people can file complaints and complaints and complaints and complaints with the Human Rights Commission, tagging their political enemies, and every one of them could be awarded $20,000. That's how they're going to swarm Rebel News, True North, Western Standard. They're going to say, we're not going to prosecute them from the government because we know this will be struck down as unconstitutional. This is a violation of freedom of the press and freedom of speech. But we're just going to let any Canadian citizen, not even Canadian citizen, anyone in this country, including foreign citizens, they can now say you're full of hate, and we can order you to take something off the internet and pay $20,000. That's how they're going to get you. I'm almost done. The next page is on child pornography, and it's just how the social media accounts would handle the data. Again, that's got nothing to do with the main purpose of this law. Much of this is already covered in other laws. This is just camouflage. So let's just go to the second last page. What does it mean for Canadians? Canadians will benefit from reduced exposure to harmful content. No, I don't think so. The internet is unlimited. It's like the ocean. What Trudeau's really trying to do is squash his domestic opponents. Trudeau doesn't care about hatred on the internet. He cares about deeming his opponents haters. That's what this is about. Special protections for children. Well, there are special protections for children. This maybe increases it by a few percent, but that's not what this bill is about. Public oversight and accountability from online services. Yeah, that's really not what this bill is about, and those companies already do this voluntarily. Strengthen criminal code provisions against hate propaganda and hate crimes. Well, I guess you could say it that way, but they're really inventing a new hate crime. Hate itself or fomenting hate are now considered crimes. Those aren't crimes. Those are feelings. If you feel hate in your heart, we don't like that, and we want to work on that as people. We want to fix that. But you don't criminalize a feeling in your heart unless what you're trying to do is what Lavrenti Beria said, show me the man, I'll find you the crime. Every single human in the world hates something. Every single human in the world loves something. And we try and manage our hate and expand the love. And if you actually really do hate things, transmogrify it in some positive force. If you hate slavery, campaign to abolish slavery. If you hate the lack of civil rights for minorities, campaign, take those feelings of grievance. Hate comes from grievance. And a grievance may be well-founded or not. But until you deal with the underlying grievance, you're not going to deal with the manifestation of hate. If you find someone who's full of hate, and you just duct tape his mouth and say, you can't say those words anymore, you haven't stopped him from hating. In fact, you probably made it worse because you said your feelings are not legitimate. Your grievance does not need to be addressed. In fact, I'm going to punish you for even being upset by something. Now, not everyone's grievances can be addressed, and that's life. I mean, we're not angels. We're flesh and bone. But you cannot simply ban a feeling or the fomenting of a feeling. In fact, I think what you'll do is you'll get more of that feeling. I think there's a correlation between the countries in the world that let you vent peacefully, that let you blow off steam rhetorically, as opposed to countries that you aren't allowed to, where you have to resort to, God forbid, violence. This will not reduce the hate in the world. What it will do is weaponize the vague definition of hate for Trudeau to go after his enemies. I think the bottom part of this page is the most terrifying. The bill will give Canadians the tools to flag harmful content. No, it won't. The social media companies already have that tool. Request the expeditious removal of content that sexually victimizes a child. I think the social media companies already have that. I think Facebook could improve, but this is not new. Submit complaints and report non-compliance to the Digital Safety Commission. That is new, and the 24-hour rule means that the tech companies will feel pressure to delete anything, because how can you have a proper hearing at Friday night at midnight? Submit complaints of non-compliance. Contact the Digital Safety Ombudsperson to receive support. Yeah, I'm just going to guess that they're not going to support people like me or any of Trudeau's critics. File complaints with the Canadian Human Rights Commission when facing online hate for fun and profit. If you're paid $20,000 to complain against Rebel News, I think that you would probably file a complaint every single week. And then the last page here, where they claim that this is demanded by the public. That's not true. The only people that want this are in the grievance industries. The lawyers, the complaintologists, the diversity activists, the people who bill thousands of dollars to give anti-racism lectures that are actually racist. That's who wants this. No normal people want the government to be the decider of things. So that's just a lie. So that's the last of the page that was circulated to journalists. And I didn't mean to spend 45 minutes on that, but I think that gives you a touch of things. And I'm going to go through the law with you, but I want to play some clips first, because I've just been engrossed in that document. I want to show you the most astonishing and the most Orwellian clip of the day, which was the Justice Minister, Arif Virani, sorry, I didn't mean to laugh, saying, this will enhance freedom of speech. Here's the clip. Take a look.
But I want to be crystal clear about what the Online Harms Act does not do. It does not undermine freedom of speech. It enhances free expression by empowering all people to safely participate in online debate.
Is that true? Does that enhance your ability to participate in online debate? How could it possibly? Every single person in the world has the ability to participate in an online debate for free. Just go to Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, a gazillion other social media apps I don't even know about. And you can participate at will, subject to the terms of service and the laws that exist right now. All this law does is bring in limits. All this law does is bring in penalties. There's no possible way that a single word in this bill could enhance free speech. How could it? Because everything I've described in the last 45 minutes has been a new form of limit. And everything, the penalties, the hasty decisions in 24 hours or less, the vague definition, how on earth could that do anything except chill expression? The fact that he said that with a straight face and reporters there didn't laugh out loud tells you that they're all in on it, because, of course, Lavrenti Beria, show me the man, I'll find you the crime. Every single newspaper in Canada could be taken down with this bill. Can you Google the Toronto Star's front page during the lockdown where they demonized the unvaccinated? You should be able to find it pretty quick. I want to show that. I mean, I remember just a few years ago, Canada's largest newspaper, the Toronto Star, happens to be Canada's most pro-liberal newspaper. Yeah, put that on the screen. This was literally their front page. If an unvaccinated person catches it from someone who is vaccinated, boo-hoo, too bad. I have no empathy left for the willfully unvaccinated. Let them die. I honestly don't care if they die from COVID, not even a little bit. Unvaccinated patients do not deserve ICU beds. That was the front page of the Toronto Star. Harmful, hateful, fomenting hate, of course. Do you think that Trudeau's hand-picked commissioners of internet safety would ever uphold a complaint against the Toronto Star? Of course not. The CBC is full of hate towards Albertans, towards Conservatives, towards Donald Trump, towards Pierre Poilievre, towards Rebel News, towards pro-life people, towards people who have firearms, towards truckers, like the list of people, towards oil and gas workers. The list of people that the CBC hates is as long as your arm. Do you think for a second that they would uphold a hate award and give 20 grand to someone who complained? Of course not. They will only use this against their enemies. What they're doing with that $20,000 reward is actually the worst part of this, because it mobilized every loser on the internet, every woke, chirp, 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 how dare you, how dare you. They're just squawking away at the internet, and most normal people ignore them. But this will give them each a job, where if they file a complaint a week, and maybe they only win half of them, so that's 26 complaints a year. That's $500,000 a year that they could make. And pretty soon, Trudeau's critics would be smashed to oblivion. And by the way, moving to the United States won't help you because, of course, if the tech companies don't take them down within 24 hours, they get smashed. So this really is about creating a great firewall of Canada, driving out any free speech-oriented social media, or in the case of Facebook, they just turned off Canadian news because they don't want to pay Trudeau's $100 million a year shakedown. It's incredible. There's a couple more clips of Arif Virani, but frankly, I want to get into the law. It's 1:51 Eastern Time. I've spent nearly an hour clearing my throat here. Now, the good news is what I've gone through will help us skip certain parts of the actual text of the law. Now, I'm going to tell you, this law is 100 pages long. Now, I'm not here to scare you, but the reason I tell you that is because we're going to take some time. I think we're going to take 45 minutes to go through this. By the way, I've got my Whistle Stop Cafe mug here. When in Mirror, Alberta, make sure you stop by. I got great burgers. We're going to go through this. When I say it's 100 pages long, it is, but remember, half of it's in French, so that reduces it to 50 pages. Some of it's technical language we don't need to read, and some of it I've already covered. So I think we're really just going to look at 30 pages together. Can you bear with me? Now, I think our team is going to cut this up into little videos so people don't have to watch the whole massive thing. But what I'm trying to do here today is give you a deeper look at this law than you're going to get on the CBC or any pro-Trudeau media. I want to show you what's actually scary here, and so you can see it with your own eyes. So let's get right into it. Bill C-63, an act to enact the Online Harms Act, to amend the Criminal Code, the Canadian Human Rights Act, and an act respecting mandatory reporting of internet child pornography. Okay, that again, you can see what they're really doing here. They're bundling their hate speech provisions with a child pornography provision just to distract you. So whenever you criticize, they'll pivot to, are you against banning child pornography? No, actually, we believe in banning child pornography. It's already in the criminal code. If you want to give police more resources, that's a good idea. And if you want to have special policies for Facebook, I think that's a good idea too. But that is not the center of this law. Let's get cracking. Summary, Part 1 of this enactment enacts the Online Harms Act. The act, among other things, A, establishes the Digital Safety Commission of Canada, whose mandate is to administer and enforce that act, to ensure that operators of social media services in respect of which the act applies are transparent and accountable. B, creates the position of a digital safety ombudsperson, whose mandate is to provide support to users of social media and to advocate for the public interest in relation to online safety. That's a clever way of saying a censor. C, it establishes the Digital Safety Office. So they got 3 new offices, 3 new bureaucracies, millions of dollars, 12 commissioners, 100 staff, tens of millions in budgets. That's what it takes to silence a country, and Trudeau's willing to do it. D, imposes on the operators of social media service, in respect of which that act applies, a duty to act responsibly in respect of the services that they operate, including by implementing measures that are adequate to mitigate the risk that users will be exposed to harmful content. 2, a duty to protect children. 3, a duty to make content that sexually victimizes a child or re-victimizes a survivor inaccessible. 4, a duty to keep records. E, authorizes the Digital Safety Commission to accredit certain persons that conduct research or engage in education, advocacy, or awareness activities that are related to that act for the purposes of enabling those persons to have access to inventories of electronic data and to electronic data of the operators of social media services in respect of which the act applies. I don't know exactly what that means. We'll get into it later. But basically, they want to snoop around inside Facebook, YouTube, Google, Twitter. I wonder what they're looking for. Provides that persons in Canada may make a complaint to the Digital Safety Commission. Authorizes the governor in council to make regulations. All right, let's skip down a little bit further. Part 2, amends the criminal code. This is the scary stuff. A, create a hate crime offense of committing an offense under that act or any other act of parliament that is motivated by hatred based on certain factors. Create a recognizance. That means like a restraining order to keep the peace relating to hate propaganda and hate crimes offenses. That's what I alluded to earlier, a pre-crime. C, define hatred for the purposes of the new offense. I can tell you what hatred means. It means hard feelings. It means to despise something. Everyone knows what hatred means. It's a feeling. But that's what they're doing. There used to be hate crimes. Now they're just throwing away the crime part. Now hate in itself is a crime. Hate is not a crime. You have it in your heart. And if you are the only person in the world who has banished every trace of hatred from your heart, then you are a saint. But even saints would say that they have hatred in their heart that they wrestle with. This is Trudeau criminalizing feelings. Let's keep on going. Define hatred, increase the maximum sentences for hate propaganda to life in prison. You don't get life in prison for terrorism in Canada. You get $10.5 million and a public apology from Justin Trudeau. Just ask Omar Khadr. Part 3 amends the Canadian Human Rights Act to provide that it is a discriminatory practice to communicate or cause to be communicated hate speech by means of the internet. Now stop right there. I know what a discriminatory practice is, and so do you. If you go into a restaurant and are told you're Jewish, you can't come in, or you're black, you have to sit in the back, or whatever crazy thing you can dream up. I don't even think that happens 1 in a million to Canadians. I mean, theoretically. I mean, I'm not saying it didn't happen in the past. I live in Toronto, which is a majority-minority city. Any landlord that refused to rent a home to a visible minority, I think you'd be out of business pretty quickly in this town. That's just an example of a kind of discrimination that may have been more prominent 60 years ago. It's just not there now. That's discrimination. Discrimination is if you're not hired because of your race, or if you're fired because of your race. I say again that it's hard to imagine that happening in our completely integrated, ethnically diverse economy. I'm not saying it never happens, but it's sort of rare. But if it does happen, that's discrimination. Discrimination literally means to choose between things. He's got a discriminating palate, means he knows what taste, he knows the difference between fine wine and crummy wine. He's got very discriminating taste. It's actually a compliment when you phrase it that way. When you use that to describe something in real life, discrimination in the workplace and in the marketplace, you're doing the opposite. You're saying he's discriminating based on invalid reasons like race or religion. We do allow some discrimination, of course. For example, in women's changing rooms, only women can go there. There's certain youth prices. Kids pay less at a movie theater than adults do. So that's discrimination that we allow. Although, of course, they're now calling sex discrimination in bathrooms, they're calling that a hate crime. But my point is, they're now saying that merely expressing a point of view on the internet is discrimination. How is that discrimination? You're not banning someone from riding a bus. You're not banning someone from renting an apartment. You're not firing someone from work. All of those things are discriminatory actions against someone based on a prohibited ground. How is an internet comment discrimination? Well, when Justin Trudeau says it is, it is, because that's the whole purpose of this law. Part 4 amends the reporting of internet child pornography. I'm fine with that. That is not the purpose of this law. All right, so let's skip down to the table of provisions, or another way of saying a table of contents. We're going to skip through this quickly. Online Harms Act, interpretation. So you can see it's got a table of contents. We're just going to skip through this because it's just a table of contents. So we're going to scroll all the way down until we get to the beginning of the bill. And you can see, yeah, there it is. And that's the title of the act. I won't read that again. The Online Harms Act is enacted as follows. Definitions. Let's spend a little bit of time on definitions. The following definitions apply in this act. Child means a person who is under 18. So that's relevant when they talk about bullying, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Commission is the Digital Safety Commission. Content that foments hatred. This is very interesting to me. It means content that expresses detestation or vilification of an individual or group of individuals on the basis of a prohibited ground of discrimination within the meaning of the Canadian Human Rights Act, and that given the context in which it is communicated, is likely to foment detestation or vilification of an individual or group of individuals on the basis of such a prohibited ground. Let me translate. So they're saying hatred means if you detest something. That's just sort of a thesaurus. Hatred, and I hate something, I detest something. Sort of the same thing. Vilify is to say, is a little more than hate. It's to say you're awful. I don't just hate you, I think you're evil. That's vilification and detestation, a little bit different. But content that foments hatred, that's such an important concept because, like when I was charged with hate speech for publishing the Danish cartoons of Mohammed, I didn't actually do anything. I didn't express hatred towards anyone. They didn't say I did. What they said I did is by publishing something, quote, likely to expose a person to hatred or contempt. So they said that by publishing those Danish cartoons of Mohammed, and why don't we throw them up on the screen while I'm talking? By publishing those Danish cartoons of Mohammed in a news article, I was likely to cause person A to hate person B. Didn't happen. They had no evidence of it happening. No one said it happened. No one was harmed. It didn't happen. It might possibly in the future happen, likely to expose a person to hatred or contempt. But it's not an actual harm. Not even a fake harm of you hurt my feelings. I was prosecuted for 900 days. You can go to Wikipedia and you'll find it there. I think they still have it. They may have taken it down now. Just go to Danish Cartoons Wiki and you should be able to find it. It wouldn't surprise me if it was taken down. 15 years ago, you were allowed to see that online. Yeah, there it is. Just click that. Yeah, they won't let you see a large copy of it. Just show that on the screen for a second. Yeah, thank you. So this was a Danish cartoons of Mohammed. You can see some of them are very mild. Two of them are a little bit edgy. One looks like a turban is a bomb. That's in the top. And one is two women in a burqa and a guy with a sword. But the other ones are pretty friendly. That top left one there, it's the cartoonist drawing Mohammed. The middle left on the top one looks like a stylized Olympic logo or something. The one on the right, Mohammed looks sort of friendly. That one on the left middle there, it says, "Stop, stop, we've run out of virgins," a commentary on suicide bombers. You can see one that looks like a guy in the desert with a donkey, it's sort of like a illustrated Bible. The one on the bottom left there, that boy is named Mohammed, and he's basically saying something like, "I'm Mohammed, I'm a kid here in Denmark," or something. So that's it. These cartoons, they caused huge boycotts, riots around the world, hundreds of people killed in riots about these cartoons, people who had not even seen the cartoons. We did a news story about it. Simply doing a news story about that news event was deemed likely to expose a person to hatred or contempt. That is now criminalized. Content that foments hatred or might foment. It's likely to foment. Show the law again. Is likely to foment detestation. Do you see that? Likely to? Highlight that on the screen. Likely to. So it didn't happen yet. Might not happen. If it happens, no one was stabbed, no one was punched, they just had hard feelings, that's now a crime. That's what content that foments hatred means. You didn't have to hurt anyone. You didn't have to damage anyone. No one had to show that they lost $1 or lost a friend or had anything bad happen to them. It's just that they could have. It was likely to expose me to what? To hard feelings. That's now a crime. Let's keep trucking. Content that incites violence. Well, that's already against the criminal code. This is a distraction. Inciting violence is against the criminal code. It has been ever since we've had a criminal code. Let's keep going. Content that incites violence, extremism, or terrorism. Keep scrolling down. That's against the law right now. That's not new. That's just in there to distract you. Content that induces a child to harm themselves. Well, this is interesting because remember we just read the definition of a child, anyone under 18. So what does this mean? Content that advocates self-harm. Does that include cutting off, God forbid, your breasts as a girl or your penis if you're a boy? That's what they're talking about with the transgender surgery. Child was defined as anyone under 18, and this says content that induces a child to harm themselves means content that advocates self-harm, disordered eating, or dying by suicide, or that counsels a person to commit or engage in any of these acts. I would put it to you that it's self-harm to chop up children in the transgender, gender-affirming surgery. Is that a crime? Yeah, I don't think so. I think Trudeau will use this, as Lavrentier-Beria says. This will be applied against whoever the government wants to. Content that sexually victimizes a child or re-victimizes a survivor. Obviously, everyone agrees with this. Much of this is already in the law, and if we need to update the law, so be it. But that's not the purpose of this law. That's not the new offices. That's not the new hunter-killer commissioners. That's not the $20,000 bounty for having your feelings hurt. This is the window dressing that they want you to focus on. Content used to bully a child. Again, a child could be 17 and a half years old. Means content or an aggregate of content that, given the context in which it's communicated, could cause serious harm to a child's physical or mental health. What does that mean? What does the word bully mean? I mean, I suppose we know it when we see it. To criminalize bullying for someone who's 17 years and 10 months old, basically an adult. You can criminalize communicated content if it could cause serious harm to a person's mental health. This is threatening to criminalize social interactions that might include just harsh banter, hazing in a friendly way, theoretically even harsh criticism from a family member or from a teacher or anything. Well, I mean, the word bully is so vague. In fact, I don't think the word bully itself, the word bully itself is not actually defined in this law. And I think that's why. Okay, let's keep going here. Harmful content means intimate content communicated without consent. Again, that's revenge porn. We agree that that should be banned. I think it already is, at least in some jurisdictions. We've already gone through this list already. Indigenous people, intimate content communicated without consent. We've already gone through that. The minister, obviously the Minister of Canadian Heritage here. Hey, I'm going to stop for 1 second. I'm going to throw to a video. Do you have those Stephen Guilbeault videos handy? Like I say, this bill was just released by Arif Virani, the Minister of Justice and Online Harms. But this bill was drafted when Stephen Guilbeault was the Heritage Minister. And he sort of did the rounds talking about it. He talked about things like how can you stop certain websites. He answered a few questions And I'm just waiting for, we're calling up the video here. I've shown these to you before if you've watched my show. What's the real purpose here? Well, did you have the criticize politicians clip? And then the nuclear one is the second clip. So the first one is criticize politicians. We're just calling it up, folks. I want to prove, before I go further, I want to show you one of the worst people in the Canadian cabinet, Stephen Guilbeault. When he was drafting this bill, and he was talking to a friendly government-subsidized journalist at a liberal think tank, I think it was called Canada 2020, he was asked, well, yeah, that's the clip there. He was asked, what's the purpose of this? Why are you doing this? Here, go ahead and play the clip.
We've seen too many examples of public officials retreating from public service due to the hateful online content targeted towards themselves or even their families.
That's his rationale. People are mean to politicians. So the hate and the fomenting hate, you heard him. It's because we've had too many people hating politicians, including him. But what happens if a website just won't stop? Like, what do you do? Well, he has an answer. Go full North Korea. He calls that the nuclear option. Here, do you have that clip handy? Take a look.
Envision having blocking orders. I mean, maybe it's not, it would likely be a last result nuclear bomb in a toolbox of mechanism for a regulator.
There you have it. Now, I understand we have a freedom-oriented lawyer from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms who will be joining our call. So, Olivia, as soon as Marty is ready, let me know. But I'm going to keep going until then, because we're still in the definitions part here, and it's already 2:11 Eastern. Office means the Digital Safety Office of Canada. Ombudsperson means the Digital Safety Ombudsperson. Operator means a person that operates a regulated service. I'm going to keep going. Social media service means a website or application that is accessible in Canada, the primary purpose of which is to facilitate interprovincial or international online communication amongst users. Let's just keep going. I'm going to skip some of these definitions because I'm going to focus on the definition that the next one there. For greater certainty, content that foments hatred. Because this is what Stephen Guilbeault was talking about there. Causing another person to have hard feelings. That is not a crime. You're allowed to have hard feelings. In fact, it's in tyrannical regimes where you're not allowed to have hard feelings. Another thing that Stalin did is he would make note of whoever stopped clapping first. When he would give a speech, there would almost be this contest to see how long you could clap because no one wanted to be the first to stop clapping. What's my point of giving that anecdote to you? Is in a free society, you're allowed to hate your politicians. You're allowed to have hard feelings. You're allowed to detest whoever you like. And hopefully you will find a positive outlet, campaign, run for office, write a letter to the editor, get involved and actually fix a problem in life. It's only in authoritarian regimes where you're not allowed to feel those feelings. But of course, you cannot stop someone from feeling some way. You can just force them to fake it, which is what they did in the Soviet Union. So here's the definition. For greater certainty, and for the purposes of the definition, content that foments hatred, content does not express detestation or vilification solely because it expresses disdain or dislike, or it discredits, humiliates, hurts, or offends. Well, what does that mean? Because they already defined it as it causes detestation or vilification. They're saying just because you dislike something or hurt or humiliate or offend, you know what that is? That's a contradiction, which is how they're going to excuse their liberal friends and how they're going to accuse their conservative critics. So I showed you the front page of the Toronto Star. Clearly fomenting hatred. I mean, I think that was pretty obviously its purpose. That was certainly its effect. And by the way, you don't have to have a mens rea. You don't have to have a guilty mind to be convicted of any of this. It's just, could it cause someone to have hard feelings? You don't even have to have intent in your heart. So If you are conservative and you foment hatred, you're guilty. If you are liberal and you foment hatred, well, not solely just because you express disdain, dislike, or discredit, humiliate, hurt, or offend. That contradiction is so essential in the law. That's how they're going to go after conservative critics, but spare the haters on the street. Every day in this country, we see pro-Hamas protests calling for genocide, condemning the Jews, actually engaging in real crimes, not just hate crimes. They will never be prosecuted on this law. Do you think Arif Virani, who is an Ismaili Muslim himself, so he's fairly liberal. I'm not going to pretend he's an Islamist. He's not. But he's clearly in the pro-Hamas liberal caucus, along with Melanie Joly, Omar Al-Gabra, Ahmed Hassan, Justin Trudeau. Do you think Arif Virani is going to prosecute some of these pro-Hamas extremists on the street? Well, he hasn't so far, and he's had some legal tools to do so. So he absolutely will not. Let's keep going. They have some more definitions regarding sexual matters. Again, that is not the main purpose of this law. Let's skip ahead down to 6.1, which is exclusion of private messaging feature. The duties imposed under this act do not apply in respect of any private messaging feature of the regulated service. So it doesn't apply to your direct messages. So I guess there's that. So I'm going to scroll down a bit because we've already covered some of this stuff when we looked at the government flyer. So I'm going to skip ahead to page 9, where it talks about the Digital Safety Commission of Canada, establishment and mandate. The Commission's mandate is to promote online safety and contribute to the reduction of harms caused to persons in Canada as a result of harmful online content. And in particular, they talk about child pornography. Obviously, there's no one in the world who could disagree with that. But like I say, that's not the main purpose of this bill. Let's skip ahead to Section 12. The Commission consists of 3 to 5 full-time members to be appointed by the Governor and Council. That's a fancy way of saying cabinet. The Governor and Council may remove a member for cause. 5-year terms, Section 13, 5-year terms. Section 14, they'll be paid a certain amount. They'll get benefits. And look at Section 16. They don't have to be a Canadian citizen. You can just be a permanent resident here. So you can censor, you can be Trudeau's officer of censorship, and you don't have to be a Canadian citizen. Section 17, a member must devote the whole of their time to the performance of the functions. And then they have a chairperson and a vice chairperson, and they talk about committees. I'm going to skip over that because that's all administrative matter that's not substantive. Section 25 talks about powers they can delegate. Section 27, let's pick it up there. When making regulations and issuing guidelines, codes of conduct, and other documents, the Commission must take into account freedom of expression. Really? Every single thing they do is infringing on freedom of expression. You don't add laws and punishments and life sentences and fines and offices and inspections. Literally every single word, every single comment, every single jot and tittle in this is an infringement of freedom of expression. I think, you know, who might save us in the end is the big tech companies who probably have some claim against Canada for an unfair trade practice. Ironically, I think we'll probably get more help from Facebook, YouTube, Google, and even the Chinese-owned TikTok to stop this than we will from any Canadian source. Equality rights, privacy rights, the needs and perspectives of Indigenous people of Canada, and any other factor that the Commission considers relevant. Really? Any other factor at all, eh? Anything. So they can literally use anything they think relevant when they go about their censorship. All right, good to know. Now here's the next one, the Digital Safety Ombudsperson of Canada. Go ahead and show this on the screen. Appointment and mandate. To hold office for 5 years, to support users of regulated services and advocate for the public interest with respect to systemic issues related to online safety. Oh, I hear the word systemic issues and I hear systemic racism immediately. So they're going to be the DIE, the Diversity, inclusion and inequity, cultural Marxism injected straight into the veins of the social media companies. By the way, they're all completely woke except for Twitter. You could call this the anti-Twitter law. And I'll skim through the remuneration, benefits. They just talk about all the money this person's going to get, the powers and duties. Just read that, Section 37. In fulfilling their mandate, the ombudsperson may gather information with respect to issues related to online safety, including with respect to harmful content, such as by obtaining the perspective of users of regulated services and victims of harmful content. So it's basically going to be a therapy session where people put their grievances together and complain to a government official. Yeah, what could come from that other than censorship? Highlight issues related to online safety, including by making publicly available any information gathered under paragraph A. So basically, they're going to be an advocate, a stalking horse, an accuser. C, direct users to resources, including those provided for under this act, that may address their concerns regarding harmful content. That's the get-rich-quick scheme of filing $20,000 jackpots with the Canadian Human Rights Commission. That's really what this is. This person will take any complainant and help them craft a complaint to go after Rebel News, True North, National Post, Toronto Sun. That's what this is about. Digital Safety Office of Canada. This is the third agency. Trudeau does not have three agencies tackling inflation. Trudeau does not have three agencies tackling taxes, cost of living, cost of housing. Doesn't have three agencies dealing with our decrepit military that doesn't have equipment. But censorship is something he'll have not one, not two, but three agencies for. So important to him, he will literally rename the Justice Minister the Minister of Justice and Online Harms. Chief Executive Officer, again, Chief Executive, that sounds pretty fancy. That's going to be a $250,000 job right there. As with the others, he's got a term of service, and he's got payments and human resources. He may employ any employees that are necessary to conduct the work of the office. I'm on Section 52 here. May delegate powers. Like they're setting up new agencies here, new commissions, new boards, hiring lawyers, hiring political friends. There's no way this is going to cost less than $100 million a year. Part 4, duties of operators of regulated services. So these are, I went through this in the brochure, these are the duties that they demand Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and other social media accounts have. An operator, that would be like Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg, has a duty to act responsibly in respect of a regulated service. Well, of course, that you didn't need to put that in a law. That's in the common law. That's, you know, you have a duty to the public, you have a duty to your customers, you have a contractual duty, you have a common law duty, you have statutory duties. You did not need a law to say that. That is already the case. The operator of a regulated service must implement the measures that are adequate to mitigate the risk that users of the service will be exposed to harmful content on the service. They already do. They do so because they have that common law duty and because they want to have a safe place. But their definition of a safe place is not the same one that Justin Trudeau has. That's the purpose of this law, is to change the terms of service for the social media companies in a way, I mean, they're already woke enough. They're not woken up for Trudeau. And the crimes are what Trudeau is adding. Section 55(2). In order to determine whether the measures implemented by the operator are adequate to mitigate the risk that users of the regulated service will be exposed to harmful content on the service, the commissioner must take into account the following factors: the effectiveness of the measures in mitigating the risk, the size of the service, including the number of users, the technical and financial capacity of the operator, whether the measures are designed or implemented in a manner that is discriminatory on the basis of a prohibited ground of the Canadian Human Rights Act, and any factor provided for by regulations. So they're now going to tell Facebook, YouTube, Google, Twitter, how to run their companies. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if they comply, or if, like Facebook, they say, you know what? We love you, Canada, but you enjoy the great firewall of China that Trudeau's brought over there. We're just going to stay out of this. I wonder if those companies will allow themselves to be used like this. There was actually a clip. Do you have that clip of when Varane was asked? I think it was the last clip you showed me, Olivia. When he was asked if he had any feedback from the companies. And I don't think he's actually spoken to him about this. Do you have that clip? Here, let's take a listen to that. He didn't bother to consult with them. What could go wrong?
Now that the legislation is out, have you heard anything from social media platforms, especially after we saw Meta pull out of Canadian news with their opposition to C-18?
So I've not heard directly in terms of a sort of a formal response from the platforms. What I can say to Canadians is that the idea is not to chase platforms out of Canada. We want platforms operating in Canada, but we want them operating at a baseline standard of safety. And I find it troubling that we've got more rules that relate to the Lego in my kid's basement than we do for the most difficult and dangerous toy that is in every Canadian's home right now, which is the smartphone or the screen that their children are in front of. We need to establish baseline standards to protect the safety of Canadian children and to protect vulnerable people from hatred. That is what we're doing with this legislation, which I think is fundamental for Minister of Justice.
Every word of that is a lie, of course. Frankly, I don't know what laws there would be about Lego in your living room. I can't even think of what one of them would be. I think that's just such a, whoever came up with that talking point, maybe that's that new, PR whiz the Liberals have hired. There are hundreds of laws that would apply to Facebook, YouTube, et cetera, including the entire criminal code. Just because it's the internet doesn't mean it's immune from the same laws that apply to the telephone, to the fax machine, to handwritten notes. You can rob a bank by saying, give me your money, by writing a note, give me your money, by sending an email, give me your money. I suppose you could rob a bank with a podcast, theoretically. Robbing a bank is illegal no matter the format you use. And laws against child pornography are made more complicated by the technology in terms of their policing. But the laws are the same. Now, by the way, I support increased child pornography laws, but you see how that was his emphasis there instead of the hate speech stuff. When he said he didn't talk to these foreign companies at all, I'm just getting deja vu all over again, because Facebook said we're going to pull out if you make us pay $100 million to Trudeau's friends. And they didn't think Facebook was serious, and Facebook was. You cannot get a news story about Canada on Facebook, which is a terrible setback to every single Canadian news outlet, except for the CBC, which doesn't need traffic. They just care about one viewer, Justin Trudeau. But every other media company in Canada has suffered a decline in viewership because Facebook was a source of viewers. So they just devastated the news industry. It'll be fascinating to see what happens here. I'm going to take I see a couple of Rumble rants coming in. I'm going to read a few of them. Aurora Benu says, hey, Ezra, have a wonderful day. What about domestic disputes? I don't think that applies to this legislation. I haven't seen any of it. I mean, unless you're tweeting about a spouse, but I think that would be, I don't think it would be covered by this law. Nana Awake says, so murders walk free in Trudeau's Canada, but you disagree with Trudeau or hurt his feelings, you're locked up for life? Welcome to enforcement of my idiocy in China. That's what this, I thought, when I first heard life in prison, I thought someone was joking, but no, it's right in there. Candy 3, $5. Amanda Todd's mom is on the news stating that this could have saved her daughter. What part of the bill applies to this? There are portions of this bill that have to do with revenge porn and child pornography. I'm not familiar with the case of Amanda Todd. Some of those things have been prosecuted at the provincial level. And by the way, I'm completely open to that. I don't know a lot about that area of law. That's not what this bill is about. This bill is about fomenting feelings of hate. This bill is about lifetime life sentences for hate. And hate is a human emotion. They added the terrorism stuff, which is already illegal. They added the child pornography stuff, which is already illegal, but I think they could improve on it. They added that to distract. Candy 3, I want to know how they see it applies to her. I don't trust what they say, which is why I ask here. How are they twisting it or outright lying? Well, we've been going through things. I'm just going to, and I'm sorry, I'm not an expert in the case of Amanda Todd. 15-year-old Canadian student and victim of cyberbullying who hanged herself at home. You know what? I do remember this case now. And there was also a case, if I'm not mistaken, in Atlantic Canada somewhere. I'm sorry the name didn't ring a bell immediately to me. I can't answer that right now, but so far, I believe that revenge porn should be made illegal. You don't need a 100-page bill and setting up 3 new censorship offices to make revenge porn illegal. You need one line in the criminal code. This is not about that. That's the distraction. I think we should do that. I'm not up to speed with what the criminal code provisions are on revenge porn. I'm sorry, it's not something I've looked into. But that's not what this law is about. I'm going to Google it right now. I'm Googling revenge porn. Canadian Criminal Code. I hope that this search doesn't yield the results I don't want. Oh, good. The first result was non-consensual distribution of intimate images. That's the first hit I got. I'm glad I didn't get a porn result. Cyberbullying and non-consensual distribution of intimate images. I'm reading a Government Canada page. I don't want to go deep into it right now. Here, you know what? Yeah, you found it. Can you pump that up? I know we've got Marty on deck, but I just want to answer your question properly. And I'm so glad you asked it, and I'm so glad I took the time to look. And Olivia, you found it at the same time I did. Can you put that on the screen? So this is the law right now. We are looking at the Criminal Code of Canada as it stands now. So let's read this. By the way, great question. Thank you very much. And we found the answer. Let me read it. This section is called Publication of an Intimate Image Without Consent. Let's read it together. Everyone who knowingly publishes, distributes, transmits, sells, makes available, or advertises an intimate image of a person knowing that the person depicted in the image did not give their consent to that conduct, or being reckless as to whether or not that person gave their consent to the conduct, is guilty of an indictable offense and liable to imprisonment for a term of not more than 5 years, or B, of an offense punishable on summary conviction. And then they define intimate image, including in the person is nude, exposing his or her genitals, etc. At the time of the recording, there were circumstances that gave rise to a reasonable expectation of privacy, and the person depicted retains a reasonable expectation of privacy at the time the offense is committed. And then there's more details there, but my point is that this law, it looks like it was passed in 2014, if I'm reading the notes here. That's another way of saying I think this law has been on the books for 10 years. And the case you asked me about, Amanda Todd, was in, I think it was 2012. So I think that this amendment to the Criminal Code probably came about in reaction to the Amanda Todd case, and I think there was another case similarly. Do you see my point? And I'm not very familiar with that area of law. I just read it with you together. But you see my point? I said that the child pornography and the revenge porn aspects here are a distraction. And because of your excellent Rumble comment, I just Googled it with Olivia, and we demonstrated that that has actually been against the law, 5 years in prison, and that's been the state of the law since 2014, if I'm reading that provision correctly. Revenge porn has been illegal in Canada for 10 years, and there may have even been ways to prosecute it before then, but at least for 10 years, it's been in the Criminal Code. And the Liberals are claiming this bill is about revenge porn today. It is not. This bill today is about censorship, using revenge porn, using child porn as the excuse. Do you see what I'm saying? It's already against the law to incite violence. Of course, you knew that. It's already against the law to incite terrorism. Of course, you knew that. You knew that. You know that. Are you going to be tricked and deceived by Arif Irani when he says, no, we've got to stop revenge porn? Yeah, I agree with you, buddy. And the time machine, we can go back to 2014 and vote for it again if you want. But you are just a liar if you're saying that's what this bill is about. All right, I'm so glad that we took that Rumble rant and looked into it. I'm just simply not familiar with that section of the Criminal Code, but now I am. And what was that section? Was that 162? Section 162.1, just for you to remember. If anyone ever asks you about that, you can say Section 162.1 of the Criminal Code. It's been illegal. Revenge porn has been illegal in Canada, punishable by up to 5 years in prison. It's been illegal for 10 years. Don't let Trudeau trick you. All right, without further ado, I want to bring in Marty Moore, one of my friends from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, who's been waiting patiently as I did a little bit of Googling about the Criminal Code, and I'm so glad I did. Marty, great to see you. Welcome to the live stream.
Thanks, Ezra. Great to be with you.
Likewise. So give our viewers a little bit of a biography. Where are you joining us today from? And you are a staffer with the Justice Center, am I right?
Well, thank you, Ezra. I'm joining you from Calgary. I've been working with the Justice Center for about 10 years, and I currently lead a team of lawyers actually across the country who are funded by the Justice Center to defend constitutional freedom. So it's a privilege to join you. But obviously, our work is not done. In fact, with a bill like this, it's hard to know when it will ever end with the kind of ideas that you see being propagated in this bill, which are so illiberal.
Yeah.
Interestingly, being brought forward by the former Liberal Party, if you might say. I'm not sure what to call it now.
Well, I went through a 17-page media handout that the government gave yesterday, and I'm sort of marching my way through the bill. I'm only at page 17, so I'm taking my time. Maybe I presume that you've read it. Instead of us going through it, section by section, maybe you can tell me what concerns you the most, sort of skip ahead to the bad parts, so to speak. What do you think is the worst part of this, or there's probably several of them?
Ezra, to pick a worst part, I think one of the worst parts we can find is the amendment to the criminal code that they are wanting to put forward to allow for people, anyone with the consent of the Attorney General of Canada, to bring an information forward to say, not that you have committed a crime, a speech crime, but that you may commit a crime, that they have reasonable grounds to believe that you will commit a crime. And what kind of crimes are we talking about? We're talking about crimes such as inciting hatred, or the most recent amendments to the criminal code that have passed, downplaying the Holocaust. And in order for them to come to court and say, you haven't committed this, but we think that you will commit this crime, a provincial court can then order you, on the basis of someone else's belief, has to be reasonable, but that's in the eyes of a court to find. They can order you to undertake a recognizance. And that is a court order that you promise to do a bunch of different things. And under this new piece of legislation, it's not just a normal kind of undertaking, we're going to keep the peace. We can put an ankle monitor on you. We can issue a curfew that keeps you in your house. We can order that you submit your bodily fluids for the registry. We can
pause right there. I want to call that up on the screen. Olivia, can you, in the PDF document, type in the word recognizance? And it's the seventh or the sixth. It's one of the first hits there. Scroll ahead to where it says conditions in recognizance, because Marty's talking about, you click ahead to the next one. You know how you can go to the next one and find, and then the next one, and then, So the provincial court may commit the defendant to prison for a term of not more than 12 months if the defendant fails or refuses to enter the recognizance. And then, Marty, I'm just going to rattle through the recognizance. I'll go straight back to you. I just want to show on the screen, as you mentioned it, the provincial court judge may add any reasonable conditions to the recognizance that the judge considers desirable to secure the good conduct of the defendant, including wearing an electronic monitoring device, return to and remain at their place of residence, so house arrest, abstain from the consumption of drugs, of alcohol, provide for the purposes of analysis a sample of bodily substance, provide a sample on regular intervals, abstain from communicating directly or indirectly with any person, or refrain from going to any place. Firearms, ban from firearms, surrender anything. I've never seen such a draconian. Is this the provision you're talking about? I haven't got this far ahead, but I did. Yeah. I mean, I was familiar with this with the earlier version of this bill. Is that what you're talking about, Marty?
This is what I'm talking about, Ezra. Like, this is so bizarrely draconian. And again, you do not find these kinds of conditions for even serious crimes. You find these kind of conditions being imposed on someone who has been, there's evidence against them for committing actual terrorism. And what we are talking about here, Ezra, we're not talking about someone actually having committed offense. No, if you go up to section sub 3 under adjudication, we're talking about a provincial court judge finding that an informant has reasonable grounds for the fear that you will do something that violates the speech provisions of the criminal code. And just to remind you of how broad our criminal code speech provisions are getting, and they're going to get broader under this bill if it passes. We're talking about provisions such as, and it lists it there, 319 sub 2 of the criminal code. And what does 319 sub 2 of the 2.1 of the criminal code says? It says everyone who, by communicating statements other than in private conversation, willfully promotes anti-Semitism. Of course, we're all against that. By condoning, denying, or downplaying the Holocaust. So what we are saying is that if this law passes, if someone is concerned that someone else might in the future downplay the Holocaust, well then they can take that concern, and if that concern is found to have reasonable grounds, the judge in that case can issue an order that you submit to a recognizance with all of these conditions, or if you don't submit to a recognizance, that you go to jail for a year. That's what we're talking about here, Ezra.
You know what? And the section right before that, so there's section 319.2 and then 319.2.1. It's very interesting what they're doing here. I think I know what they're doing, Marty. There's a left-wing Jewish organizations in Canada who for years have supported human rights censorship, even though it's greatly backfired against the community. I think this is their way of sort of buying off some of the official Jews who are more censorship-oriented, saying, look, yeah, we're going to smash a lot of things here. We're going to smash a lot of civil liberties, but we're going to let you smash your enemies here. This will be used against Jews, too. I mean, earlier, Marty, I talked about how I published the Danish cartoons of Mohammed. I was prosecuted for 3 years for that. And the Jewish community actually expressed support for these kind of censorship provisions 50 years ago when they were drafted. But that kind of minority report preemptive censorship you refer to, whether it's against Jews or Muslims or Christians or anybody, is a shocking departure from how we operate in Canada. We don't believe in a pre-crime. We don't believe in prior restraint. Oh, Your Honor, he hasn't said anything yet, but I just know he's going to. He hasn't done anything yet, Your Honor, but boy, I feel it in my bones. And look at him. He's the kind of guy who might say something wrong. And so while I myself, of course, don't like Holocaust denial, I also know one thing, Marty. If someone doesn't believe the Holocaust happened, throwing them in jail is not going to change their mind. It's actually probably going to confirm for them that you're trying to cover up the truth. If someone denies the Holocaust, I think the first thing you got to say is, well, why did we bring this person to Canada, hundreds of thousands of people to Canada who deny the Holocaust? The second more practical thing is to try and persuade them otherwise. But simply threatening them with prosecution is not going to change their mind.
Absolutely. And of course, this applies to more than simply Holocaust denial or downplaying the Holocaust as this statement reads. It applies to the broader category of all of the hate offenses, the promotion of hatred. And again, we're not talking about actually adjudicating whether or not, based on a standard of beyond a reasonable doubt, someone has in fact advocated for genocide or willfully promoted hatred. We're just talking about whether someone can convince a provincial court judge, any provincial court judge in Canada, that you have a reasonable ground for fear that someone will, for example, advocate genocide or promote genocide. Well, we can certainly see how that could cut both ways in the heated conversation that we have. These terms are commonplace across the country, whether it's Jewish or Palestinian or any issue of debate.
Let me pull up section 319. Olivia, I just sent you the link in the live stream Slack channel. Section 319, I've always been against this section in the criminal code. Section 319 is called public incitement of hatred. And Section 319 2.1 is about the Holocaust, and we've been talking about that. But that's just one detail. Look at how 319 starts. 319.1, everyone who, by communicating statements in any public place, incites hatred against any identifiable group where incitement is likely to lead to a breach of the peace is guilty of an indictable offense liable to imprisonment of a term not exceeding 2 years. And then section 319.2, everyone who by communicating statements other than in a private conversation willfully promotes hatred against any identifiable group is guilty and has 2 years. So you were referring to 319 2.1, which specifically talks about the Holocaust. But 3.91 and 3.92 talk about any ground. And let me remind our viewers, that's not just age, race, gender. That's now gender identity. That's now gender expression. That's transgenderism. So if you have expressed anything that is likely to expose a person to foment, to feelings, you're guilty of a crime. And now, as you point out, Marty, you don't even have to do it yet. So, for example, Rebel News talks about public controversies, including extreme cases of transgender activism, where big men play sports against women and even girls. And I can see some transgender activists going before a judge and saying, Your Honor, they haven't broken the law yet, but boy, they're getting close. I need you to put David Menzies under house arrest. I need you to put Ezra Levant under house arrest. I need you to put an ankle monitor on them. I need you to ban them from communicating with certain people. They haven't done anything yet, but we need that ordered, Your Honor, and that's the power that this judge have. Am I correct, Marty? I'm relying on you to correct me because I'm sort of working my way through this legislation in real time.
Absolutely. Here. Ezra, we are reeling, I think, our whole legal team that we're looking at this right now. This is some of the worst drafted legislation. And when you don't have the ability to look at this legislation, all of a sudden say, no, Ezra, we're going too far. We're past. No, I have not seen any check on this yet. Like having read this and reading it again here, we're talking about real imprisonment or, agree to all these conditions of people just because someone else is judged by a provincial court judge to have a reasonable fear that they might cross the line into some level of hatred. And we know that the definition of hatred is a squishy definition to start with. It's one of the most difficult legal concepts to explain because it's also very much in the eye of the beholder, in the eye of the hearer, or the ear of the hearer, I guess I should be saying here. But and now, if you have a reasonable fear that someone's going to speak hatred in some form, you are going straight to jail, as they say, or you're going to agree to all of these conditions at the discretion, again, respectfully, but of a provincial court judge, simply based on whether there is a reasonable grounds for the fear. And so again, this is just one provision, one absolutely draconian provision, but only one provision of concern in this piece of legislation.
You know what? You're so right on that. And Olivia, can you please re-up that clip of Varani, the Minister of Justice and online harms? I was just saying, Marty, there are hundreds of different statutes on the books with thousands of different legal provisions. The criminal code itself is an enormous document with hundreds of different crimes, but the only one, his title has been changed. I don't know if you know this, Marty. He's no longer the Minister of Justice. He's the Minister of Justice and online harms. This is the most important thing to the Trudeau government right now. But listen to him talk about freedom of speech. Just get a load of this.
But I want to be crystal clear about what the Online Harms Act does not do. It does not undermine freedom of speech. It enhances free expression by empowering all people to safely participate in online debate.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that's something that Big Brother would say in Orwell's 1984. No. We're not censors. We're the Ministry of Truth. We're not the Pentagon. We're the Ministry of Peace. We're not rationing your food. We're the Ministry of Plenty. And it'll be amazing to me, it already is amazing to me, to see how many journalists who are in the protected class of journalists are fine with this, are either duped into thinking this is new law against revenge porn or new law against child porn, which is not, or just say, you know what, we have too much anarchy on the internet. That's one of the things that Varani said. We have anarchy. Do you have that clip, Olivia? We don't have anarchy. Laws apply to the internet the same way they apply to the telephone, same way they apply to the fax machine. Do you have that anarchy clip? I wouldn't mind playing that and having...
Well, yeah, Ezra, just to comment briefly there, it's really an upside down world when you hear the statement that this is going to enhance freedom. In other words, the government is only going to give you the freedom that it thinks is enhancing, and it has a very narrow view of what enhancing is. And I mean that press conference, even the statements that the government had prior vetted and were putting forward, if you go actually before Minister Varani was speaking there, you'll hear the use of the term so-called freedom.
Oh,
In
my
fact,
God.
It's quite clear.
Oh my! We got to grab that, Olivia or Efron. I haven't seen that when he says a very so-called freedom. Oh my!
It was actually
God.
a speaker before Minister Varani was speaking that said, how dare you try to cling to your so-called freedom?
Oh my!
That is
God.
actually the element.
Who
and
said
that is
that?
Actually,
We'll have to dig it
was
up.
It was one of the mothers, I believe, of someone who's been a victim, but the statement was not saying, someone was victimizing my child in a specific way, exercising their freedom. It's people that would oppose the bill, if I'm mistaken, would be claiming this so-called freedom. And then you have the minister coming up right after that saying, well, we are going to enhance your freedom. Ms. Ezra, we're going to enhance your freedom as a media journalist. You don't have to worry about saying anything that would offend the government. We will enhance it.
There's no way government can enhance freedom. It only can reduce it. There's no possible way it can enhance any freedom other than removing itself. Certainly creating 3 new digital bureaucracies is no way to do it. Just absolutely shocking. Well, we'll find that clip and we'll play it a little bit later. Just unbelievable. Marty, last
One
words.
thing I made
go ahead.
Point to just briefly, and this is just a statement that you're probably going to keep discussing this bill, but the question is, what is the motivation for this? Is there a level of lack in our laws? And as you mentioned, laws on the criminal code already apply to online content, but just to issue points that are already dealt with, this legislation saying we're going to do these things, and then we can show you existing laws that already deal with those exact same provisions. So intimate content posted without consent. Well, as you've already mentioned, look up section 162 of the criminal code, which is the publication of intimate image without consent. Or now this bill is trying to target content that sexually victimizes a child. Well, guess what? Section 163 of the criminal code and section 163.1 already deal with obscene and child pornography. Content used to bully a child. Well, there is a provision called criminal harassment that can be used to stop that kind of extreme bullying. Content that encourages a child to harm themselves. Well, section 241 of the criminal code prohibits counseling or aiding suicide, and including whether suicide ensues or not. And we're talking about that kind of level of harm here. Content considered hate speech. Well, of course, we've already been over section 319. Content that incites violence. Well, we have a number of provisions against that, but check out section 559, seditious words. Content that incites terrorism. We already have sections 83 and a number of subsections under that. So what is this bill trying to do that isn't already criminalized? It's a good question to ask. What are they trying to do? But if I was to put one cap on this piece of legislation, what we are seeing is, I think, an absolute illiberal flip. And it's maybe most evidenced in a provision where they are now going to enhance criminal sanction for speech to make it possible for you to go to life imprisonment for something you say. Yeah. And of course, we have known in the free societies of the West that speech is different from action. There is this presumption of protection for speech. And then, of course, we've been seeing, the carve out of minor exceptions to that protection. But once you see a society adopt a view where expression is viewed as equivalent to, or in some cases even worse than the action itself, that society cannot long remain a free society. And that's what I'm concerned about.
Marty, this is terrifying. And I'm just looking up some of the things that you're mentioning as you're saying them. Olivia, I'm going to put in the Slack channel some of those criminal code provisions that Marty referred to. We're going to quickly look at those. Marty, thanks so much for joining us. I hope the Justice Center really digs into this. And obviously this is the first version of the bill. It'll be interesting if this is rammed through Parliament. I think it will be. I think this is part of. I think it's no coincidence that they introduced this after Trudeau re-announced his coalition with Jagmeet Singh of the NDP. I think this is such an atrocious and contentious bill. He needed to lock in their support for it, and obviously they will. They're even worse censors than he is. I think the Senate will also speed this through. They'll be tricked by saying, "Oh, we're against revenge porn. We're against terrorism." As you pointed out, all those things are already in the criminal code. I think this battle will be in the courts. And by the way, I think that, and we haven't even gotten to the part where they incentivize people to file complaints with the Human Rights Commission. I think that the Rebel News, there's almost no way this can't be weaponized against Rebel News. There's almost no way that it won't be, because it's not even up to the government anymore. They have provided huge cash incentives to make frivolous, feelings-based complaints against Rebel News, $20,000 at a time. I think that's the purpose of this, is to basically destroy any free speech that criticizes Justin Trudeau, and to wink at free speech that destroys Trudeau's enemies. Marty, good luck over there at the Justice Center. We need you guys more than ever.
Thanks very much, Ezra.
All right, there you have it. Marty Moore from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. And I want to quickly show you some of those criminal code provisions that Marty referred to. And I'm not going to go through in detail, but I just want to show them to you. If you can put those on the screen there. Like, this is just a small excerpt. It's called Sexual Offenses, Part 5. Offenses, every person commits an offense who makes, prints, publishes, distributes, circulates, or has in their possession an obscene thing, and then they define it, sell it, expose it. It goes on and on. There's section after section. They in section 163.11, they define child pornography. They talk about making, distributing, possessing, accessing child pornography, and aggravating factors. This has been in the law for decades. In fact, you can see some of these provisions predate the internet. Many of these provisions go back generations. Child pornography, of course, was a scourge even before the internet. The internet has vastly expanded the scope of it, but the law has kept up. The law has been updated and adjusted. I see certain provisions in the version on the screen here were adjusted in 1993. Some were adjusted in 2018. This is constantly updated to keep up with the times, both the technological times. There's a 2015 update. The criminal code is amended all the time. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be amended more. I'm not saying there aren't more improvements that can be done. But to pretend that without the law, the online harms bill, child pornography or revenge porn or inciting terrorism would not be happening is a lie. Understand the reason they're lying to you, because they're trying to make you say, no, there's some good parts to it. The good parts to it are already in law. The banning of revenge porn, I showed it to you. 10 years ago, the law was passed. 5 years in prison. Arif Virani didn't do that. It was actually done under the Harper government. All right. It's 2:57 Eastern. We've been doing the show for 2 hours, but we're not done yet. I want to go back to the Bill C-63, and I want to speed up. I'm glad we had a good chat with Marty. We're right now in Section 56 of the bill. If you want to go back to that, Olivia, that's exactly right. If you can just go to that section. And it's basically talking about some of the regulations that apply to, just search. If you just type in find 56 and tap it a few times, it'll pull you ahead. And one more time. There you go. That's where we are. That's where we left off. Okay, so I'm going to speed through this. Just talking about the power to issue regulations and guidelines. Tools to block users, Section 58. The operator of a regulated service must make available to users who have an account or otherwise registered tools that enable those users to block other users. Does anyone not know that exists? Like I said before, if you don't have the blocking function on your social media app, you're not actually allowed to sell it on the App Store. This is an example of a law drafted by people who either know nothing about social media. I have an idea, a block button. The Liberals very well know about block buttons because they've been trying to block Rebel News, and we've been taking them to court to fight that. But they either don't know anything about social media, which is possible, or more likely they know that this is already the case, but they're trying to distract from the true essence of this bill. Tools and processes to flag harmful content. The operator of a regulated service must implement tools and processes to enable a user to easily flag to the operator content that's harmful, et cetera, et cetera. That is ubiquitous in social media. Like I say, it's already in the law. Sorry, I don't know if it's in the law. It's already in practice. So this law is redundant, unnecessary, other than it's to camouflage their true intent. Let's scooch down a little bit. Section 60, multiple instances of automated communication by computer program. It's basically saying ban spam. I can assure you that stopping spam is an enormous priority for social media companies. I think it's one of the main things that Elon Musk has railed against since buying the app is how to stop spam bots. And he's come up with that ideas like making accounts pay a few dollars or whatever. Do you think you need to tell Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram that spam is a problem? They're going full tilt on it. Does the government have better solutions than them? I doubt it. But again, this isn't what the Online Harms Act is really about. Section 61. The operator of a regulated service must make a resource person available to users of the service to hear users' concerns. Every single app does that. I mean, they don't have someone on a telephone, but they have automated systems. Contact information accessible. The operator must ensure that the resource person is easily identifiable and the resource person's contact info is easily accessible. Obviously not a phone number, but how is that not what they do right now? And even if it was, this is not the essence of the law. Digital safety plan. My battery's dying on my earpiece, but I don't think we're going to have any more guests, so I won't worry about it, Olivia. Section 62.1, having a digital safety plan. Every single company already does that. They just call it their terms of service. I'm going to skip ahead because why would I spend a lot of time on this stuff? This is just the distraction. These are the shiny beads, especially designed for low information voters who don't really know that all this stuff is in there. This is to get people, yeah, these are really good ideas. I wish we had a block button on Twitter. This is a really good idea. I wish Elon Musk cared about spam. Yeah, he already does, but what you've done is you've taken the bait. That's not what this is about. Let's scooch ahead to section 64, duty to protect children. That already exists under law. I just showed you the child pornography provisions of the criminal code. Do we want to pump that up? Is Facebook a particular problem? Yes, I think so. I don't think you need to change the law for that. I think you just need to implement the law and impose the law on Facebook if they're not taking down their child porn. I'm going to scooch ahead because so much of this is stuff that, like, for example, duty to keep records, section 72. The operator of a regulated service must keep all records, including information and data, that are necessary to determine whether the operator is complying with the operator's duties under this act. Okay, great. Thanks for putting that there. I really don't think that is new, but if you want to say that that's what you're accomplishing here, go ahead. Access to inventories and electronic data. Section 73. The Commission may, on request and in accordance with the criteria set out in the regulations, accredit a person, other than an individual, for the purpose of giving that person access to the inventories of electronic data that are included in the digital safety plans. The person's primary purpose is to conduct research or engage in education, advocacy, or awareness activities, and the person conducts research that is or engages in education, advocacy, or awareness activities. Now, I don't know what this means in reality. I don't know what they're trying to pull here, but I think what they're saying is they want the ability to root around in Elon Musk's internal records. I think what they want to do is they want to poke around inside Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and take a good look around just out of curiosity, maybe out of competitive interest. I don't know. We don't really know what this is. What does it mean when the purpose is education, advocacy, and awareness activities? So you're going to poke around in the inside of a company in their private stuff in the name of advocacy, advocating what, on behalf of whom, towards what end? I think it's a disaster, and I'm guessing the companies will rightfully refuse it if it's for those purposes. I mean, look at section 74.2. Research project. An accredited person may make a request for research projects. I have no idea. That's not the most important part here. I want to move ahead. I want to get to the parts that aren't the tricks. So I'm going to skip the section called remedies there. I'm going to skip ahead because, as Marty pointed out and as I showed you, this bill is not about revenge porn or other things that are currently governed by law. In fact, the point that I've spent some time on it shows that maybe in itself I've fallen for the trick. That's not the point here. Let's go ahead. I'm scrolling all the way down to when they talk about sorry, I'm scrolling through so much of the bill. I'm on page 46 of the law. Okay. I'm at section 120. Let's go to section 120. I'm skipping way ahead. Every operator commits an offense. So this is, I'm just going to spend a little bit of time here. This is basically the penalties for Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, etc. If they don't follow the law, here's what could happen to them. Every operator commits an offense that contravenes an order of the commission, that obstructs or hinders the commission or an inspector, that makes a false or misleading statement, and every operator that commits an offense under subsection 1, on conviction, on indictment, to a fine of not more than 8% of the operator's gross global revenue, or $25 million, whichever is greater. So if Facebook commits an offense here, the Trudeau government is going to take either 8% of Facebook's revenue or $25 million, whichever is greater. Facebook revenue 2023, what do you think it was? $134 billion. $134 billion times 8% is $10 billion. What do you think Facebook, YouTube, Google, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok are going to say when they read that? They're going to say, well, we won't break the rules. We're not going to break the law. We're lawful companies. I mean, that's what Facebook said. Facebook was faced with C-18, which said you have to give $100 million to Trudeau's friends in the media if you link to their work. So Facebook said, well, we're not lawbreakers, so we just won't link to their work, so we're in full compliance because the law doesn't apply to us now. We don't link to Canadian news, so good luck with all that. So Facebook is not breaking the law. They're just not participating in a business activity that puts them at a $100 million cost. So I just did the math on Facebook's global, and that's, by the way, that's 10 billion US dollars. It's about 13 billion Canadian. Do you think that it's worth the risk for Facebook to operate in Canada at all if there's a law that says they could be fined $10 billion US for an offense? I don't think Facebook has made $10 billion in Canada in the last decade. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they have. I don't know. Maybe this is an opening offer, but I think that you're going to see a USMCA, U.S., Mexico, Canada, America Free Trade Agreement complaint out of this. Section 121, persons other than an operator. If you can contravene the law, you could be, there's fines there. If an individual, $50,000 fines, like just enormous fines, but no prison. We're very, very glad. Section 124 says you won't go to prison for lying to the commission, but we can put you in prison for life, as we talked about, for hate speech. So that's sort of incredible. I'm going to skip the next section because it's not as important as the other stuff I want to get to. Cost recovery, I'm going to skip ahead. Obviously, the Trudeau government is the biggest mooch around. Coming into force, we're going to skip ahead. So I'm on page 57 of the document, and I'm skipping over. Now, I want to pick up again at page 59, which is part 2 of the law called Criminal Code. You see that there? So on page 59 of the, like you see at the very bottom of each page, it says the page number. So just go to Criminal Code Amendments to the Act. Or let's skip ahead let's get to the heart of it. Type in offense motivated by hatred, because that's really where it starts. Type in offense motivated by hatred. Yeah, and click one more time. And click it again. And click it again. So with a C, offense motivated by hatred. OFFENCE, motivated by hatred. Yeah, that's it. Perfect. Yeah, put that up on the screen. So this is the most terrifying part of the law. So what this is this law called the Online Harms Act will amend other laws. It'll amend the Human Rights Act. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But it'll also amend the Criminal Code. And it's creating a new hate crime right here. Everyone who commits an offense under this act or any other act of Parliament, if the commission of the offense is motivated by hatred based on race, national or ethnic origin, language, color, religion, sex, age, mental or physical disability, sexual orientation, and then slow right down here, or gender identity or expression, is guilty of an indictable offense and liable to imprisonment for life. Let me say that again. If the government thinks you hate someone based on their gender identity or expression, so for example, if there is a grown man in a changing room with girls, because his gender identity is, well, I'm a trans woman. And if you react to that person in any manner that shows hatred, which is defined as detestation or vilification, get ready to go to prison for as long as Paul Bernardo. That's shocking. Do you see that? Sexual orientation or gender identity or expression. Get ready to go to jail for life. The next one is even more terrifying. Fear of hate propaganda offense. Fear of hate propaganda offense. Scroll down a little bit. There it is. A person may, with the Attorney General's consent, lay in information before a provincial court judge. This is what we were talking about with Marty. If the person on reasonable grounds that another person, if the person fears on reasonable grounds that another person will commit an offense. So this is the pre-crime. This is the time machine future crime. This is the Tom Cruise movie Minority Report. I'm just going to read this one more time slowly because it's so shocking. I want you to get it. This section is called fear of hate propaganda, not hate propaganda. That's obviously allowed. Go to jail for life or whatever. But if you're just afraid that someone might in the future possibly, well, that's a crime too for them. Fear of hate propaganda offense. A person may, with the Attorney General's consent, lay in information before a provincial court judge if the person fears on reasonable grounds that another person will commit an offense that we've described about hate speech about transgenderism or minority or whatever. You can get a court order against someone just because you're afraid of them. They haven't done anything to you yet, but you think they might. subsection 3, if the provincial court judge before whom the parties appear is satisfied by the evidence adduced that the informant has reasonable grounds for the fear, the judge may order that the defendant enter into recognizance to keep the peace and be of good behavior for a period of not more than 12 months. Next section. However, the provincial court judge is also satisfied that the defendant was convicted previously of any offense. The judge may order that the defendant enter into recognizance for a period of not more than 2 years. The provincial court judge may commit the defendant to prison for a term of not more than 12 months if the defendant fails or refuses to enter in the recognizance. So let me summarize. Someone's afraid that you might do, you haven't done anything yet. Someone's afraid that you might. The judge says you're under house arrest, you got to wear an ankle bracelet, no more alcohol for you, you're not allowed to go to these 5 places. And if you don't do that, straight to jail. Can I get the Parks and Rec straight to jail clip? I mean, remember that, I ever watched Parks and Rec? I didn't watch a lot of it, but there's this funny scene where Fred Armisen plays some little dictator from some Latin American country, does such a great job. This is not a laughing matter, but we're going to take a second to laugh at it. Go ahead and play that clip.
Holding coffee! This is outrageous. Where are the armed men who come in to take the protesters away? Where are they? This kind of behavior is never tolerated in Boracua. You shout like that, they put you in jail right away. No trial, no nothing. Journalists, we have a special jail for journalists. You're stealing, right to jail. You're playing music too loud, right to jail, right away. You're driving too fast, jail. Slow, jail. You're charging too high prices for sweaters, glasses, you right to jail. You undercook fish, believe it or not, jail. You overcook chicken, also jail. Undercook, overcook. You make an appointment with the dentist and you don't show up, believe it or not, jail, right away. We have the best patients in the world because of jail.
That's funny because it was a joke when that was filmed probably 10 years ago. But it's not funny now because that's what happens in Canada. Did you say something mean about someone whose gender identity or gender expression you disagree with? Because maybe they were in a girl's changing room? Straight to jail. Undercooked fish, overcooked chicken, straight to jail. Undercooked, overcooked. That's very funny because we have to laugh. I've already taken you through conditions in the recognizance here with Marty. Wear an ankle monitor, house arrest, abstain from drugs or alcohol, provide urine and blood samples, abstain from communicating with any person. And this is all before you've done anything. You haven't even been accused of doing anything. You just might do something. Seize your firearms. Just absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. Let's skip ahead. And then they have lots of details on how your blood will be collected. And it's like, boy, they've thought it through on your blood and your urine samples, page after page after page on that stuff. We're going to skip ahead. Youth Criminal Justice Act. They're just adding fear of hate propaganda to various laws, the Criminal Code and the Youth Criminal Justice Act. Coordinating amendments. So I'm skipping ahead here. I'm scrolling through because these are just really technical amendments to how do you affect this law? Well, you got to change a bunch of other laws. So I'm just going through all this stuff because it's not of interest politically. This is of interest for lawyers, I'm sure. But all right, let's skip ahead to Canadian Human Rights Act. Exactly. Now, this is the part I'm really scared about. Orders regarding discriminatory practices. A discriminatory practice, as described in sections 5 to 14.1, may be the subject of a complaint, and anyone found to be engaging or have engaged in a discriminatory practice may be subject to an order. And as I read to you earlier, they include an internet posting as a discriminatory act. It's not. A discriminatory act is when you choose amongst things based on some characteristics. So discrimination is you're allowed to come into this restaurant, you're not. You're allowed to book a ticket on this airline, you're not, based on race or religion or whatever. We do allow certain discriminations. If you're a child of tender years, you're not allowed to buy a ticket because you're too young. We obviously have certain discrimination, but unlawful discrimination is what I've just described. Giving your opinion on the internet is not discrimination. How's that discrimination? You haven't altered someone's life other than through an idea. You haven't taken any action. That is now covered by the Human Rights Act. So look at this next section here. 13.1, this is what Stephen Harper's government repealed. They're bringing it back. It is a discriminatory practice to communicate or cause to be communicated hate speech by means of the internet or any other means of communication in a context in which the hate speech is, again, future crime, likely to foment detestation or vilification of an individual or group of individuals on the basis of a prohibited ground of discrimination. So you didn't actually interfere with anyone's life. You didn't ban them from a building. You didn't deny them service at a restaurant. You didn't refuse to bake a cake. You just posted something on the internet. And if that could cause him or her to have hard feelings towards the transgender man going into the girls' changing room, you're guilty. Subsection 2, for the purposes of subsection 1, a person communicates or causes to be communicated hate speech so long as the hate speech remains public and the person can remove or block access to it. So everything you've ever read, written, or said historically can now get you convicted. Exception, this section does not apply in respect of private communication. Definition of hate speech. We've already read this earlier. Content that expresses detestation or vilification on a basis of prohibited grounds. And I've already told you that includes gender identity, gender expression. I'm just scrolling through this stuff. Now, one of the most important things in our legal system is, in fact, it's a charter right, it's the ability to face your accuser, to face the charges, to know who's prosecuting you. We don't have secret trials in Canada. We have certain parts that are subject to publication bans to protect the identity of children or if there's some national security reasons, but there are no secret trials in Canada. It's not like the Star Chamber, secret trials centuries ago in the UK. But look at this section here, non-disclosure of identity. This is absolutely insane. The Human Rights Commission may deal with a complaint in relation to a discriminatory practice described in Section 13 without disclosing to the person against whom the complaint was filed or to any other person the identity of the alleged victim, the identity or group of individuals that has filed the complaint, or any individual who's given evidence or assisted the Commission in any way in dealing with the complaint, if the Commission considers that there is a real and substantial risk that any of those individuals will be subjected to threats, intimidation, or discrimination. What does that even mean? Well, I'll tell you what it's going to mean. So you will receive notice one day that you are being prosecuted. You won't know who filed the complaint. You won't know who gave evidence against you. You don't know who has helped the Commission prosecute you. You won't have any of that information. You won't know if it's a disgruntled ex-employee. You won't know if it's a for-profit company who's decided to make complaints for cash. You won't know if it's an extremist activist. You won't know if it's the Liberal Party of Canada trying to embarrass their opponents. That's what that says, non-disclosure of identity. Just incredible. Oh, and by the way, if you happen to find out, you can be ordered to keep it secret. Let me read to you Section 9, the next section. The Commission may order a person who, in the course of the Commission's dealing with a complaint in relation to a discriminatory practice described in this section, has learned the identity of the alleged victim, the individual or group of individuals that filed the complaint, or any individual who's given evidence or assisted the Commission, not to disclose the identity. So if you find out, or if anyone finds out who's hunting you, you can be ordered to keep that a secret. This is not a Canadian law. There's no law like this anywhere in Canada. We have certain official secrets laws. We have certain laws protecting the identity of children. But this protects hunter-killer race hucksters like the kind that swarm the Trudeau Liberals. Every for-profit complainer of fortune, every victimologist, every race huckster, gender huckster, transgender huckster, they will now be able to file dozens, hundreds, thousands of complaints against their enemies in secret. And if you find out who they are, you'll be subject to a publication ban, and don't you dare say who it is. Unbelievable. I'm going to scroll down a little bit more. Section 48.1. Establishment of a tribunal. Oh, it's a little bit up. There, a little bit further up, 48.1, called establishment. Yeah, there it is. There is established a tribunal to be known as the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, consisting, subject to subsection 6, of a maximum of 20 members, including a chairperson. So Justin Trudeau is going to appoint 20 activists, friends, allies, liberal patronage donors to this human rights tribunal. They don't have to be judges. In fact, they're not judges. And they will rule on these cases of secret complaints against you in secret courts with secret evidence from secret sources. It's not Canadian. Now, what happens if you're convicted? Scroll ahead to 53.1. If at the conclusion of an inquiry, the member or panel conducting the inquiry finds that a complaint in relation to a discriminatory practice described in Section 13 is substantiated, the member or panel may make one or more of the following orders against the person found to be engaging or to have engaged in the discriminatory practice: in order to cease the discriminatory practice and take measures, in order to pay compensation of not more than $20,000 to any victim identified in the communication that constitute the discriminatory practice, an order to pay a penalty of not more than $50,000 to the Receiver General. So a fine. So you have to pay the person, the race huckster, 20 grand, and you have to pay the government 50 grand based on whatever Trudeau's appointees say. Oh, and of course, Section 53.2, a member or panel conducting inquiry may award costs. So you have to pay 20 grand to the huckster, 50 grand to the government, and you have to pay for the costs of this Star Chamber prosecution. That could be a 100 grand hit. Oh, and you'll never be able to find out who came for you. That's shocking to me. Let's keep going. I'm going to skip ahead the child pornography part because, like I say, that's been on the books for years. And I think, frankly, that Trudeau is abusing the victims of pornography and revenge porn by making them his sort of human shields here, by saying, oh, look at that woman whose daughter killed herself because of revenge porn. Revenge porn has been illegal in Canada for 10 years, 5-year fine, but we're going to trot her out today so that if you dare oppose these censorship provisions, we'll call you a racist or whatever they do. You know what? I'm scrolled through, and I'm pretty much actually through the heart of it. There's just technical amendments and technical provisions, making sure particular words are in the Human Rights Act, the Youth Criminal Justice Act, and the Criminal Code. So that actually is the end of it, and it's taken us 2.5 hours to get through it. I'm really glad we spent that time with Marty Moore. But let me conclude. And first of all, thank you for staying with me. And I want to make sure that I haven't missed any. There are some super chats. I'll just read them right now. Michael Epp, $5. Who is the person deciding on the content of the recognizance? A provincial, it's a provincial prosecutor. I think it's a provincial court judge, excuse me. If I remember correctly, we read that section. I see Olivia, we have Dave gave us the timestamp of a woman talking about so-called freedom. That's what Marty Moore said. Why don't we play that before we conclude? There's one more video that Marty Moore referenced, someone talking about so-called freedom. I haven't seen this, so I'll be watching it along with you. And by the way, I want to say in advance, Marty Moore suggested that this woman, that a terrible thing had happened to her or a family member. Obviously, we're sympathetic to her. And that's the reason Arif Virani and Justin Trudeau brought her out. Because if you're going to censor people, lifetime jailing for saying something mean about a transgender person, if you're going to allow secret trials with secret evidence from secret witnesses and secret accusers, you're not going to bring those people out. You're going to bring a vulnerable mom who's grieving over a lost family member to say, how dare you be against this, and hope that reporters won't say, well, hang on, revenge porn's been illegal since 2014, and probably illegal before that, but it was specifically made illegal in 2014. Aren't you just being used as cannon fodder by the Liberals? The Liberals will stop at nothing and stoop to anything to distract from their political purposes. Anyway, let's watch the mom together with sympathy for her. I haven't watched this clip before. I'm watching it for the first time with you now. Let's take a look.
Does Canada not have a responsibility to protect the future of our children? Should my child be a slave to fear for the rest of her life? Fear is the cause of my child's paralyzed future. At what expense do Canadians prioritize their so-called freedom? I am standing here today because we need a culture of lawfulness that strongly enforces internet regulation. The unregulated internet has damaged my child and countless children across the country.
Okay. Except we don't have an unregulated internet. The internet has been regulated since it was invented. It actually started as a government project, as you may know, in the United States with, it was called DARPANET, Defense Advanced Research Projects Administration. It was always, in fact, it was a government project from the get-go. It's always been regulated. It's always been subject to the criminal code. The criminal code has been amended countless times to keep up with the new technology. But like I say before, the criminal code provisions stand on principle. You can't utter a death threat in person, and you can't utter it by radio, telephone, or by smoke signals, or by code, or by phone, or by fax, or by internet. Like it's the uttering death threat that's criminal, and whatever mode you do it in. The law should keep up and be amended and adjusted, but the internet has never been unregulated. Except in one way. It used to be unregulated in terms of political content. That has changed, and that is Trudeau's plan. I don't know the particulars of that woman's circumstance. I'm sure something terrible has happened to her daughter. It sounds like her daughter is still alive, thank God. So it's not like she was one of those kids who committed suicide. But as Marty reminded us, by the way, counseling someone to commit suicide is a crime in our criminal code. We didn't look that up, but Marty's a lawyer. He knows it. What we have here is a monstrosity of a law. It's over 100 pages, the version I went through. The summary I went through was 17 pages. But I think that probably 90 of those 100 pages were a distraction. They were a placebo. They were a camouflage. They were just look over there. It was a misdirection, as they'd say. It was about the things that people actually want fixed. And by that, I mean for Trudeau to enforce the existing laws we have on the books. We have a revenge porn law on the books, 5 years in jail. Maybe that should be 10 years in jail. Has there even been a single prosecution under that law where a suspect, a criminal, was convicted and got the 5 years? I'm guessing that law has not been fully used. I would be very surprised if a single person in Canada had already been prosecuted to the maximum extent and given a 5-year jail term under that provision. So do you want to pump up that law? Oh, sure you could, but how about enforce it? The laws against revenge porn, the laws against child porn are on the books. How about we enforce it? The law against fomenting hate, Section 319 of the Criminal Code, which I do not like, it's already on the books. It's not being enforced. It's not being enforced against Trudeau's friends in the pro-Hamas movement. You could say that some of Trudeau's MPs, his own MPs, have engaged in hate speech. Certainly the Toronto Star in hate speech, fomenting hate against the unvaccinated. No, this is not about those things. This is not about child pornography or revenge porn. This is about criminalizing politics. It's very specifically about criminalizing transgenderism. I read to you, it's not just race and sex anymore, or religion. It's gender expression and gender identity. And to get you, to ensure that they get you, they're offering a $20,000 bounty to anyone who files a complaint against you, and they can do it in secret. You'll never have a chance to cross-examine them. You'll never have a chance to challenge them. That is not a form of justice that anyone in Canada has ever heard of before. That is not how it is. I sent a copy of this bill to one of our favorite law firms who's been fighting free speech matters for us, and I said how absolutely critical it is that we challenge this law at the first moment. Now, I have to tell you the obvious answer. It's not a law yet. It's a bill, which is a proposed law. First reading, as they call it, means the bill is entered into Parliament. And then there's debates, and then there's second reading, and bills like this typically have hearings and committees. But with the new deal between Trudeau and the NDP, I think they're going to shorten the debate on this. I think they're going to weed out any critics they don't want to hear from, and I think they're going to ram this through. Then it's going to go to the Senate, which is dominated by the Liberal Party. I think they'll probably push it through too. And then it's enacted, and then it can be challenged. Do you doubt that Rebel News will probably be the first people charged under the law? I bet we will. Not just charged once, but probably charged every single day. Probably every single news story we publish will be called an act of fomenting hatred. Probably every single one. And even if we were to win in this Star Chamber in front of Trudeau's hand-picked Human Rights Tribunal members, in a system where you can't know the accuser, can't see the facts against you, even if we were to win, the process is the punishment. And it's not just one time. Why wouldn't it be 100 times? Why wouldn't it be 1,000 times? Why wouldn't every single story we publish be prosecuted? I think that Rebel News has to fight this. It'll be interesting to see if others do. Toronto Star does not need to fight this. They will never be charged. So I showed you that quirk where there's a section in there that says just because you spread hate doesn't mean you spread hate. It makes no sense in comparison with the rest of the law, other than it's what they're going to point to when someone complains about hatred in the CBC or hatred in the Liberal Party or hatred in the Toronto Star. They're going to say, oh, well, you're allowed to hate if you're a good guy, like they are. No, I think this will be the Kill Rebel bill. It'll be interesting to see if there's any journalists in the country who are still dedicated to freedom of speech, and not just that, but a legal process that it's not this insane secret Star Chamber. Like that, I've never heard of anything so insane in my life. Even in mob trials, even where the mafia are being prosecuted, they have the right to see witnesses and challenge them and to see the source of evidence against them. You don't think those witnesses feel intimidated? But even they are not hidden from scrutiny. But if you're some transgender extremist in Canada, you can file a complaint against any critic and have your identity kept secret because you feel intimidated. And you can actually go to your provincial court and say you feel scared, and you can maybe get your opponent put under house arrest. This is the worst law I've ever seen. I remember when it was called, when it was introduced in part through Bill C-36 and in part through a proposal that Stephen Guilbeault put out, and I thought, that can't be serious. But remember, this is the final step. Step one was C-11, which gave Trudeau control of the internet. Step two was C-18, which let him loot the internet companies to pay off his friends in the media. And this is part three, censorship, destroying our legal systems, checks and balances, life sentences for hate, criminalizing the emotion of hate. I think this is the worst law ever introduced by any government in Canadian history. I'm trying to think. I suppose the War Measures Act was pretty strict, and the Emergencies Act destroyed liberty too. And I'm guessing that there were some racist laws in the past. I don't know how Japanese internment was done. But that wasn't a life sentence, was it? That wasn't good. But that wasn't prison for life. That wasn't ankle bracelets, urine tests, blood tests, banning on who they could talk to. I mean, that was absolutely an atrocious thing, done by a Liberal government, of course. But it's nothing like what's contemplated here. It'll be interesting to see in the days ahead what law professors say, what pundits have to say, what the Canadian Civil Liberties Association has to say. They snoozed, they slept straight through the pandemic and the lockdown, so I wonder if they'll be fine with this, because they're really a transgender extremist group themselves. I wonder if they'll speak up about this, or if they say, no, this is done just right. It allows us to destroy conservative political enemies and protect ourselves. We're fine with that. It'll be interesting to see. I promise you this, Rebel News will fight this until we're put in jail. That's a promise. Well, that's our live stream for today. Thank you so much for those of you who've been with us over the course of the last almost 3 hours. Thanks to Olivia, who's tried to keep up with me on all those documents and videos I threw to. Thanks to others who helped, including Efron and Mike and Dave. I'm not sure who else behind the scenes. Thank you to them. Thanks to our viewers and donors. And I'm going to wrap up now, and I'm going to try and distill what I've been talking about for 3 hours. But there you have it, you and me going together through this law. I hope you understand it better. I certainly do. And I hope you understand the risks better. From all of us here at Rebel World Headquarters to you at home, goodbye, and keep fighting for freedom.
Us through the thinking of extending the maximum sentence on inciting genocide to life in prison. Is that too much?
What I would say to you is that we put a lot of thought into many aspects of this bill. There's an aspect that deals with the commission that's being created, and there's aspects that deal with the criminal law. We are creating a new freestanding hate crime offense. We are enhancing the penalties, as you mentioned, for the hate crime offenses that exist currently. And we're also ensuring that a peace bond could be procured for somebody who there's a reasonable likelihood will create a hate crimes offense. With respect to genocide, what I know as a lawyer, as minister, and what I've learned from the stakeholders and the experts whom we have consulted is that there is a determination to demonstrate at the highest level that the maximum penalty for a crime such as advocating or promoting genocide should be increased. That penalty, as it stands right now, when you proceed by way of what's called an indictable offense, is 5 years. We are saying that at a maximum, that should be elevated to 25